After getting into the wrong bed, the CEO lost control. 1 million for you, make your own choice. The hotel suite was dimly lit, with no natural light filtering in. A floor lamp in the corner cast a warm, ambiguous glow. The woman curled up beneath the man, her eyes brimming with tears. She trembled slightly, like a pitiful kitten drenched in the rain. President G, I'm sorry, I was wrong, can you let me go? Xiao Tongyu's trembling voice carried a sobbing undertone. The more she cried, the more it ignited the beastly desire within the man. Yunze casually brushed aside a stray strand of her hair. Too late. With a rough motion, he tore open her clothes, pulled off his tie, and bound her delicate wrists. Scorching kisses rained down like a storm. Xiao Tongyu only felt a searing pain sweep through her lower body. In that moment she closed her eyes in utter despair. The next morning, Xiao Tongyu was awakened by sunlight seeping through the curtain-s gaps. The sound of running water came from the bathroom. She struggled to get out of bed, but even the slightest movement sent waves of soreness through her entire body. She slowly pulled on her clothes, only to find that most of the buttons on her shirt had been ripped off. Looking down at her fair skin, she saw a mess of red and purple marks so stark they were almost shocking. At that moment, the water stopped. Yunze emerged from the bathroom, a towel wrapped loosely around his waist. Droplets of water trickled from his short hair, sliding down his temples, along his sharp jawline, and finally landing on his impeccably defined abs. With long, fair fingers, Yunze operated his phone. The next second, Xiao Tongyu's phone buzzed with a bank notification. 1 million for you. Buy birth control or get an abortion, your choice. Thank you, President G. She put away her phone, hurriedly threw on a coat to conceal her torn shirt, her outward calm barely masking the turmoil within. Xiao Tongyu, what a foolish thing you've done. Today's schedule. Yunze's voice was cold and indifferent. President G, you have a meeting with the finance minister at 9:30 a.m., a business lunch with Consul Joshua from the embassy at noon, a video conference with the UK branch at 3 p.m., and dinner with Mr. and Mrs. G in the evening. However, young Master Han and young Master Luo also invited you out, and you haven't decided yet. Yunze nodded indifferently. Be at the office by 9. I know. A 60-degree Americano, made with Emerald Estate Gesher beans. Xiao Tongyu replied respectfully, slipping seamlessly back into her role as a professional secretary. I'll take my leave, President G. She bowed slightly and walked out the door. Yunze watched her slender waist, her long, pale legs, and the faint trace of red on the sheets. His gaze darkened with contemplation. Back at her apartment, Xiao Tongyu stripped off her clothes and stepped into the shower, letting the hot water pour down over her. She scrubbed at her skin with a towel, her tears falling uncontrollably. Her entire face was soaked, blurring the line between water and sorrow. After her shower, she glanced at the time, nearly 8 a.m. No time to grieve. She dried her hair, sat at her vanity, and began applying makeup. This apartment was a recent purchase. When she was 11, her parents had died in an accident, leaving her a substantial sum. But she never touched it. Instead, she used 2 years' worth of savings from working at G Corporation to pay the down payment for this home. After graduating as the top student from Imperial University, she secured a job at G Corporation with her outstanding qualifications. In just 1 year, she had gone from an ordinary administrative employee to Yunze's personal secretary. Yunze was a legendary figure in Imperial City's business world, handsome, cold, and untouchable. Ruthless in the corporate battlefield, he struck fear into major enterprises. Yet despite nearing 30, he remained indifferent to women. Many had tried to climb into his bed, only to be thrown out. One woman had even stripped completely, only to be kicked out naked, left crying in the hotel corridor. So Xiao Tongyu's appointment as his secretary had nothing to do with her looks. Maybe it was her boldness. She wasn't sure. That day in the underground parking lot, she had seen Yunze waiting for his driver and approached him without hesitation. Good evening, President G. I'm Xiao Tongyu from the administrative department. Yunze barely glanced at her before turning away in disdain, as if looking at trash. I want to be your personal secretary. He didn't respond, but his growing irritation was clear. Please give me a chance, President G. If you don't want to be fired, leave now. Any normal person would have been terrified and fled. But Xiao Tongyu didn't. She had already made up her mind. Licking her lips, she clenched her fists. Give me a 1-month trial. If I fail, I'll leave immediately. Just then, Yunze's Rolls-Royce pulled up. Without a word, he got in and left. She thought it was over. But the next day, she was reassigned becoming his personal secretary. For the next month, she was meticulous in her duties. She memorized his entire daily schedule before arriving at work. She learned every one of his habits. When he smashed things in anger, she tidied his office without a word. She blocked unwanted visitors and handled his friends' teasing with a composed smile. Perhaps Yunze found her competent, so he didn't transfer her away. But now, a sharp pain pricked at her chest. It was her own fault. Blinded by a thirst for revenge, she had meticulously planned her approach, slowly seducing Yunze. She knew he disliked physical contact, yet she boldly drew closer. She brushed his hand accidentally on purpose, adjusted his tie, and wiped away stray coffee stains from his lips. Secretary Xiao, do you not want your hands anymore? Of course not, President G. You wouldn't bear to. She had smiled sweetly. Despite having no experience in love, she played the role of a seasoned flirt. You're confident I won't touch you? I'm not afraid, President G. Xiao Tongyu never actually intended to bring Yunze down. She wasn't that naive. All she wanted was to see pain on those two people's faces. That was it. But she had been too foolish. In her pursuit of a trivial revenge, she had provoked the most dangerous man in Imperial City. She quickly applied a light layer of makeup and stared at her reflection. A delicate, doll-like face. Rosy lips, a straight nose, shimmering eyes, and flawless skin. She wasn't unattractive. Yet in high school, when she had been chubby and wore thick glasses, the young master of the Lin family had sneered at her. She's plain and ugly. Who would ever like her? Xiao Tongyu sighed. Just then, her phone vibrated with a new message. Tong, are you coming home for dinner tonight? I asked Aunt Wang to cook your favorite dishes. Home? What home? Xiao Tongyu set down her phone, changed her clothes, grabbed her bag, and headed for the office. On the way, she stopped by a pharmacy and bought a box of birth control pills. Chapter 2, A Slap Across the Face. In the office of the CEO of G Corporation, it was still not yet 9 a.m. Yunze, with his long, pale fingers, drummed on the desk. His sharp gaze was fixed on the door. A moment later, Xiao Tongyu entered, holding a cup of coffee. Mr. G, your coffee, she said. Millimeter. For the first time, Yunze extended his hand to take the coffee. The instant his fingers touched hers, he felt her body shiver slightly. What was going on? He couldn't quite understand it. She had been so provocative before, and now she was acting like a frightened rabbit in front of a tiger. What was this woman really thinking? Yunze looked up and noticed a red mark on her fair neck. He frowned. Button up your shirt. Xiao Tongyu quickly lowered her head, her face flushed, and she hurriedly fastened the button. Sorry, Mr. G. Perhaps due to her childhood experiences, Xiao Tongyu had never liked buttoning up her shirts fully, as it made her feel suffocated. So before leaving, she had carefully applied foundation on her neck, but it still didn't completely cover the marks. Mr. G, I'll go now. Millimeter. Watching her slender figure leave, Yunze thought back to last night, his lower abdomen tightening. His throat unconsciously moved as he recalled the night's events. He considered himself not a man driven by lust. Over the years in the business world, countless women had been at his disposal. Yet, those women with their heavy makeup disgusted him. At that time, Yunze's assistant, Wu Yang, was on his honeymoon, and Xiao Tongyu, for some unknown reason, had the audacity to volunteer as his personal secretary. Yunze knew she was just another woman trying to climb into his bed, but he was curious, was it just her beauty, or was there something else that gave her the courage to do this? He wanted to see how long she could keep this up. Sure enough, before long, she began to subtly tease him, even boldly placing her hand on his thigh. If it had been any other woman, Yunze would have thrown her off and broken her hand. But with her, he couldn't bring himself to do it. Last night, after attending a gala, Yunze was escorted back to his hotel suite by Xiao Tongyu. He suddenly picked her up by the waist and threw her onto the bed. He thought she would comply, but to his surprise, she cried, trembling all over. You wanted to sleep with me, didn't you? Are you scared now? Mr. G, I'm sorry, I was wrong. Can you let me go? It's too late. Yunze couldn't he remember how many times he had taken her. All he knew was that each time felt more intense than the last. It was as if this woman had a kind of magic that made him addicted. Finally, she passed out. He hadn't expected it to be her first time. What was she thinking? Xiao Tongyu sat at the desk outside the CEO's office, feeling sharp pangs of pain in her lower abdomen. Her period was still far off, so it couldn't be that. Could it be? Was it because of last night? She only remembered crying and begging, and eventually, the pain became too much, and she passed out. Yunze really was a monster. Tongyu, is your stomach hurting? Su-ru, noticing her pale face, asked with concern. Su-ru was Yunze's assistant and secretary, a year older than Xiao Tongyu, and had been working at G Corporation for 3 or 4 years. When everyone was gossiping about how Xiao Tongyu had gone from an ordinary administrative employee to Yunze's personal secretary, Su-ru had defended her. Xiao Tongyu must have her own abilities to gain Mr. G's approval. Those who aren't involved should shut up. Xiao Tongyu held her stomach and lowered her voice. It's fine. I'll just drink some hot water. At that moment, the sound of high heels clicking echoed from the doorway, followed by a girl from the front desk rushing in behind a woman. Sorry, Secretary Xiao, Secretary Su, Miss Qin has no appointment but says she's here to see Mr. G. Qin Mengyang shot her a look. Do I need an appointment to see Mr. G? Xiao Tongyu stood up. Miss Qin, I'm sorry, but Mr. G is in a meeting. After the meeting, I can check if you can see him. Xiao Tongyu, who gave you the right to stop me from seeing Mr. G? Qin Mengyang sneered, her anger rising on her heavily made-up face. This was the same face that had once been in bed with the man Xiao Tongyu had once liked. If it turned to ashes, she would still recognize it. No, aside from that, Qin Mengyang had also bullied her in middle and high school, leading the group of rich, beautiful girls who tormented Xiao Tongyu. They would throw her school bag, steal her notebooks, pull her hair, and mock her for being fat and ugly. Qin Mengyang was the leader of that group. But Xiao Tongyu dared not speak up. After her parents died, she was all alone in the world, with no one to help her. Sorry, Miss Qin, whether or not you can see Mr. G is not up to me. If I let you in rashly and Mr. G gets angry, you know his temper. Neither of us will have a good outcome. Qin Mengyang's eyes widened with fury. What, are you saying Mr. G won't see me and I should leave? Qin Mengyang, who had always been spoiled and arrogant, couldn't stand hearing those words. She immediately raised her hand and slapped Xiao Tongyu across the face, the sound echoing through the room. Xiao Tongyu. What are you? You were trash in high school. Now that you're Mr. G's secretary, your eyes are all the way up there. Su-ru stood up angrily. Miss Qin, this is G Corporation. Please be respectful. Xiao Tongyu pressed her hand against her red left cheek. Miss Qin, I'm working for Mr. G now. If I'm trash, does that mean Mr. G is collecting trash? Qin Mengyang's anger surged. You. Just as she was about to strike again, a strong hand suddenly grabbed her wrist. Yunze had no idea when he had come out. Which hand did you use to hit her? This one. He tightened his grip on Qin Mengyang's wrist, making her cry out in pain. Mr. G. My dad's company is still cooperating with G Corporation. I'm asking if it's this hand. Yunze's face was filled with anger, looking terrifying, almost like a beast breaking free from its cage. Xiao Tongyu quickly grabbed Yunze's arm. Mr. G, it's okay. Miss Qin didn't he mean it? She feared that Qin Mengyang's slender wrist would snap under his grip. She had seen his strength before. Yunze didn't he acknowledge her. He watched as Qin Mengyang's wrist slowly turned purple. Mr. G. Xiao Tongyu grabbed his arm even harder, silently pleading. In that moment, Yunze remembered last night when the woman was clutching his clothes, desperately begging. He released her wrist and slowly spoke. Get out. Qin Mengyang, massaging her sore wrist, tears of pain filled her eyes, and her face was full of fear. She had never been humiliated like this before, her feet felt as heavy as lead, unable to move. Turning to his assistant Wu Yang, Yunze said, get the security to drag her out and cancel all cooperation with Qin Corporation. Yes, Mr. G. Chapter 3 When will I take you in again? After Qin Mengyang left, Xiao Tongyu sat back in his seat. This was really terrible. Her face and stomach ached, and she really felt like she had no desire to live. Tong Tong, do you want to take some painkillers? Su Ru poured a cup of hot water and handed it to her. No need, it will be ready in a while, thank you Ruru. Xiao Tongyu took the cup and took a big sip. The more Su Ru thought about it, the more she became dissatisfied. Why is Miss Qin so arrogant? Why else? She's a famous actress and the eldest daughter of the Qin family, so she's naturally domineering. Xiao Tongyu took out a wet tissue and cooled her red cheeks. What popular actress? I think she's out of fashion. Fortunately, President Xi taught her a lesson today. Did she really think she could get close to President Xi? Xiao Tongyu responded absent-mindedly. Unexpectedly, Yunze, who has always been cold and ruthless, would actually help her. Could it be that he felt guilty towards her because of his brutality last night? Su Ru felt a little distressed when she saw Xiao Tongyu's red face. Qin Mengyang said Xiao Tongyu was a rubbish student in high school. Then they should have known each other for a long time. But the girl in front of me, with her fair and pink face, big, blinking eyes, straight nose and rosy little mouth, looks like a school bell no matter how you look at her. How could she be trash? But since Xiao Tongyu didn't say anything, Su Ru naturally didn't ask more. Tong Tong, would you like to have spicy hot pot for lunch? I'll treat you. No, the spicy hot pot smells too strong. Do you want to be thrown out by Mr. G along with the bowl? Su Ru curled her lips, thinking that what Xiao Tongyu said made a lot of sense. At this time, the Minister of Finance and Assistant Wu Yang, who had been in a meeting, walked out of the office together. Secretary Xiao, President Xi is looking for you. Okay. Xiao Tongyu stood up. Yunze was sitting at his desk reviewing documents. When he saw Xiao Tongyu coming in, he looked up. Come here. Xiao Tongyu walked over slowly and stood beside Yunze respectfully. What instructions does President Xi have? A fierce light flashed in Yunze's eyes. What's wrong with this woman? She was obviously not like this when they were alone before last night. Why did she suddenly become a different person after always flirting with him? Did he scare her last night? He looked up and saw 5 red finger marks on Xiao Tongyu's fair face, with blood oozing from the corners of his mouth. He suddenly felt furious. Let the propaganda department buy a trending search. Okay, Mr. G, what trending search do you want to buy? Qin Mengyang hit someone. Xiao Tongyu's eyes widened in shock. No need, Mr. G, I'm fine. Did I say it was because of you? Oh. Xiao Tongyu thought about it and it made sense. Yunze always had his own reasons for doing things, otherwise he wouldn't have allowed the Ji family to occupy the top position in the imperial capital at such a young age. How could he buy hot searches specifically for her? May I ask if Mr. G has any other instructions? He didn't even raise his eyelids. Did you take the birth control pill? Xiao Tongyu's heart started beating wildly. Yunze, how could he ask such a question in the office without blushing or beating his heart? Don't worry, President Xi. I won't cause any trouble for you after eating it. Yunze glanced at her playfully. You just said I was a garbage collector. When will I collect your garbage again? Xiao Tongyu twisted her foot in her high heels and almost fell down. There was a second time. Wasn't Yunze an obstinate devil who didn't like women? If he was pretending, then he could get any woman he wanted. Why did he keep picking on her? Seeing Xiao Tongyu's expression change, Yunze curled his lips. Why? Secretary Xiao thinks 1 million a night is too little, or is he dissatisfied with me? Xiao Tongyu was about to collapse. She was just too satisfied, so satisfied that her lower abdomen ached and her legs were shaking. She hesitated for a moment, then bit her lip and said with determination, Boss G, how about I return the 1 million to you and we pretend nothing happened? A terrifying murderous look flashed in Yunze's eyes. He pinched Xiao Tongyu's face with one hand and said, Can you get on and off my bed whenever you want? The slap she received just now was still hurting, and now Yunze was pinching her face tightly, and she felt so much pain that tears welled up in her eyes. I'm sorry, Mr. G. Seeing Xiao Tongyu's pitiful look, Yunze felt his heart tighten, and he let go of her the next second. Damn it, what on earth was going on? He actually felt that he was a little obsessed with this woman. Is it because of abstaining from sex for too long that the volcano erupted? No, he needed to calm down. Get out. Yunze said coldly. Yes, President Ji. After leaving the president's office, Xiao Tongyu turned and went into the bathroom. The tears that I had been holding back since morning continued to flow out of my eyes like pearls from a broken string. She admitted that she regretted it, deeply regretted it. When he was 11 years old, his parents died in a car accident, and Xiao Tongyu was fostered in the Lin family. The Lin family and the Xiao family were business friends for generations. The Lin family had a son, Lin Xiao, who was 2 years older than her. Lin Xiao has always been someone else's child. He is smart, has good grades, and is good looking, so both parents have arranged a marriage for him as a joke. Xiao Tongyu has always thought that she will marry him when she grows up. It was not until he entered high school that Lin Xiao started dating the school beauty Qin Mengyang. Qin Mengyang hated Xiao Tongyu because she always followed Lin Xiao around, and she kept bullying her. On Lin Xiao's birthday in his senior year of high school, Xiao Tongyu prepared a gift in advance, but saw Lin Xiao kissing Qin Mengyang behind the rockery in the school garden. Xiao Tongyu is so ugly and unsophisticated, who would like her? At that moment, she dropped the gift and ran away. Later, she returned home early after her high school graduation ceremony and accidentally ran into Lin Xiao and Qin Mengyang making love in bed. That day, she moved out of the Lin family. Later, in her senior year, she saw Qin Mengyang, a new popular female star, accompanying Yunze to attend the completion ceremony of a large shopping mall. Although Yunze had a cold face throughout, she knew that Qin Mengyang and Lin Xiao had broken up. Qin Mengyang has set her sights on the most unattainable man in the imperial capital, Yunze, the president of G Group and the eldest son of the richest family. So, out of a little revenge, Xiao Tongyu decided to get close to Yunze. Although she knew in her heart that how could a man who even Qin Mengyang disliked like her, but for some reason, she just wanted to give it a try, even if it was just to make Qin Mengyang upset for a few days. After all, she was so insignificant that no one would take her seriously. But who would have known that on the night she succeeded, she regretted it, she was so scared. She didn't want to sell her body like this. She wanted to do this with the man who loved her and whom she loved. She cried and begged for mercy, but no one would come to save her. There is no medicine for regret in this world. Xiao Tongyu knew that she was on a pirate ship and she couldn't get off. Chapter 4: Find a woman and send her to the presidential suite. After get off work, Xiao Tongyu was packing up. Tong, do you want to go shopping? Today, Yunze finished work on time for the first time ever, and Suru was in a particularly good mood. Xiao Tongyu smiled gently. No, I have something else to do, let's go another day. This morning she received a message from Lin Xiao's mother Yuan Qing, asking her to go home for dinner. Since she moved out, she has returned to that home very rarely. The Lin family didn't treat her that well and rarely asked about how she was doing. She hadn't seen Lin Xiao for a long time. Xiao Tongyu hesitated for a moment, but decided to go back and take a look. After all, it was the Lin family who raised her since she was 11 years old. But before that, she planned to go to their hospital. She was in so much pain that she couldn't walk. Imperial Capital Hospital. After the gynecologist finished the examination, she quickly entered the information on the computer, and then handed the medical record to Xiao Tongyu. I prescribed an ointment. Apply it once in the morning and once in the evening. If the pain is unbearable, you can take some painkillers. It should be gone in a couple of days. Xiao Tongyu hesitated for a moment. Sorry, doctor, where should I apply the ointment? The doctor glanced at her and said, where do you want to apply it? Apply it wherever it hurts. But, I feel pain below my lower abdomen. The doctor sighed. Didn't I tell you girls to take it easy during sex? You have to learn how to control yourself. In the end, you'll be the one who suffers. Before she finished speaking, Xiao Tongyu interrupted her with a red face. I know, thank you doctor. She walked out of the clinic feeling a little depressed. I have to control it, but it's not something I can control. Should I sue Yunze for rape? Who will believe me? Yunze, this extremely handsome man, can get 1 million for sleeping with him for one night, which seems to be not a bad deal. It just hurts so much that he goes crazy when he gets in bed. Secretary Xiao. Just as he was thinking, he suddenly heard someone calling his name. Xiao Tongyu turned around and saw Luo Juanji standing behind him. She immediately smiled politely. Hello, Mr. Luo, what a coincidence. Luo Juanji is Yunze's good friend and the son of Roche Group, the largest pharmaceutical company in the capital. The Luo family has been practicing medicine for generations. Luo Juanji is now the chief physician of the Department of Cardiothoracic Surgery at the Capital Hospital. The dean and vice dean are his grandfather and father. In addition, he is also a famous playboy in the circle of rich second generations in the imperial capital. He is tall and handsome, and very charming to girls. He can be described as a charmer. At this time, Luo Juanji took off his white coat, put on a well-tailored suit, put his hands in his pockets, and looked at Yunze's beautiful secretary with interest. Secretary Xiao, are you here to see someone or a doctor? I'm not feeling well. I came to see a doctor. Xiao Tongyu felt a little embarrassed when she met Luo Juanji at the door of the gynecology department. Luo Juanji gave a meaningful smile, which made Xiao Tongyu feel creepy. Well, I'll leave first, Mr. Luo. President Ji is still waiting for you at the Imperial Capital Hotel. Xiao Tongyu bowed slightly and quickly walked away. After watching her walk away, Luo Juanji pushed the door and walked into the gynecology clinic. Dr. Shu, what was that beautiful lady seeing just now for? What disease can I see? I had too much sex, my uterus is cramping, and my lower body is torn. Luo Juanji opened his mouth in surprise. Damn, so fierce. Tar XX nightclub on the third floor of the Imperial Capital Hotel. The flickering lights, the colorful wine, the noisy music, the crazy dance steps constitute the panoramic picture of the most popular nightclub for the rich second generation in this imperial capital. In the VIP booth, Yunze wore a black shirt tucked into his straight suit pants, which highlighted his perfect body. His white and slender fingers tapped the wine glass filled with red wine, and he glanced at the handsome man beside him. Can you make a lot of money here in one night? Han Yu sneered and clinked glasses with Yunze. That can't be compared with you. The Han Group, the leader of the Imperial Capital's hotel industry, not only owns the most upscale Imperial Capital hotel in the entire Imperial Capital, but anything related to the hotel industry is the work of the Han family. At this time, Luo Juanji walked over with his long legs. Han Yu rolled his eyes at him. Why are you so late? Did you go to the gentle place? Luo Juanji lit a cigarette and looked at Yunze mysteriously. There is no gentle place, but I met a beautiful woman in the hospital. Yunze ignored him and continued drinking. Han Yu said disdainfully, if you have something to say, just say it. Why are you looking at Yunze? When has he ever been interested in women? Luo Juanji leaned forward. Yunze, guess who I saw? Yunze, if you have to fart, let it out. Luo Juanji glanced at the boring man angrily. Okay. If you have the guts, don't ask me to tell you later. He paused, revealing an extremely smug expression. I saw Xiao Tongyu. Yunze's hand holding the wine glass stopped in midair. Why did she go to the hospital? Luo Juanji crossed his legs, opened his arms and leaned casually on the back of the sofa. The expression on his face seemed to say, Yunze, come and beg me. Speak. Anger gradually appeared on Yunze's face. The shops on Zhang Street. Luo Juanji shook his legs. Okay, go ahead. Hearing that Yunze agreed so readily, Luo Juanji put down his legs and moved closer to the two men beside him with a gossipy look on his face. Xiao Tongyu is seeing a gynecologist. I asked the attending doctor, guess what? She did it too hard, her uterus was cramping, her lower body was torn, and she was in so much pain that she came to see the doctor. Han Yu showed a surprised expression. He glanced at Yunze and saw the hostility on his face, and suddenly felt that something was wrong. Luo Juanji took a puff of cigarette, slowly exhaled smoke rings and continued, Yunze, your secretary looks pure and beautiful, but I didn't expect you to have so much fun. You know what? Your two secretaries, Xiao Tongyu and Su Ru, are both top-notch, each with their own strengths. How can you be so discerning? Han Yu kept winking at Luo Juanji, but he didn't notice at all. Hey, tell me, which man is so fierce and so unsympathetic to women? It can't be you, Yunze, har har har. Before he finished speaking, there was a loud bang, and Yunze threw the Merlot red wine bottle to the ground. In an instant, red liquid poured out and soaked the high-quality wool carpet on the ground. Han Yu complained in his heart, this 2 million red wine. Luo Juanji suddenly realized and jumped up instantly, damn it. Yunze is really you. Yunze's brows were tightly knitted together, his eyes were as dark as ink. All day long today, he felt something was wrong. He had been paying attention to Xiao Tongyu's every move, intentionally or unintentionally. When he heard that she went to the hospital, his heart tightened. This woman seemed to have some kind of magic. She not only climbed into his bed, but also seemed to have climbed into his heart. It feels very bad to be restrained by someone. Isn't she just a woman? Who is she? Yunze stood up, turned to Han Yu and said, "Find a woman and send her to the presidential suite upstairs." Yunze, are you a pervert? You want to find a woman? Luo Juanji seemed to see the water of the yellow river flowing backwards. Han Yu's expression was calm. Are you sure? Yunze didn't say anything, turned around and walked out of the door of Tar XX. Luo Juanji looked at Han Yu in bewilderment. Does he have a terminal illness? Does he want to taste the fragrance of a woman before he dies? Han Yu, say less, or you'll be the first to die. Chapter 5 Return to the Lin family. When Lin Xiao was brought into their house by Mrs. Wang, his mother Yuan Qing immediately came to greet him. Tong Tong. You're finally back. She enthusiastically took Xiao Tongyu's hand. After not seeing each other for a long time, Yuan Qing seemed to have aged a lot. She was not wearing any makeup at this time, her originally fair skin was slightly yellowish, and her eye sockets were a little sunken. Well, Aunt Yuan, you've been very busy lately. Xiao Tongyu smiled. She knew that Yuan Qing didn't like her. In the Lin family for so many years, she heard Lin Xiao complain to Yuan Qing countless times, "Mom, what era is it still a child marriage? Why should I marry that inexplicable orphan? Mom knows, and I don't like her either. My son is so handsome, he must find someone who is of equal status." The unexpected car accident that year took away Xiao Tongyu's parents, but left her alone in this world. The Xiao family was wealthy at that time. When Father Xiao Ming was dying on his bed, he asked lawyer Wang to sell all of Xiao's shares, leaving half to Xiao Tongyu and the other half to the Lin family, hoping that they would treat their daughter well and give her a home when she grew up. Relying on the funds from the Xiao family, Lin Xiao's father Lin Qinhao expanded the Lin family's business and became more and more disdainful of Xiao Tongyu, an orphan with no one to rely on and no background. The Lin family fulfilled their responsibility to raise Xiao Tongyu, and that was enough. Xiao Tongyu did not ask for more. However, the Lin family, who had always ignored her, suddenly asked her to go home for dinner again and again, which must be their ulterior motive. I heard that the Lin Group's financial situation has been bad recently. Repeated investment decision-making errors, coupled with the financial crisis, have pushed the Lin Group to the brink of collapse. Xiao Tongyu walked into the restaurant and Lin Qianhao stood up. Tong Tong, long time no see. Uncle Lin. Xiao Tongyu called out and caught a glimpse of Lin Xiao who was sitting next to him. He was playing with his cell phone. When he saw her coming, he nodded slightly as a greeting. Several people sat around the dining table, and Mrs. Wang served a variety of delicious dishes, all of which were Xiao Tongyu's favorites. She hadn't had this warm feeling of eating at home for a long time. Because Lin Xiao hated her, she had been eating in the kitchen with Mrs. Wang since high school, and Lin Qianhao and Yuan Qing didn't say much. So Xiao Tongyu knew that the warmth at this moment was all an illusion. The four of them ate in silence, and the atmosphere was a little awkward. Suddenly, Yuan Qing spoke up, "Tong Tong, do you have a boyfriend now?" "Auntie, I don't have any." Yuan Qing immediately smiled like a flower. It just so happens that Lin Xiao doesn't have a girlfriend either. "I think you two are a good match." Yuan Qing knew that Xiao Tongyu had liked Lin Xiao since she was a child. When her parents were still alive and the two families were together, she always followed Lin Xiao around, but Lin Xiao never liked her. Xiao Tongyu glanced at Lin Xiao, who for the first time did not refute her. It must be because Lin's financial difficulties were too great recently that he had to bow to her, the person he once hated the most. After all, he was a man who had worked hard in the business world. Lin Qianhao gave Yuan Qing a reproachful look, probably thinking that she was too direct. He picked up a piece of braised pork for Xiao Tongyu. "Tong Tong, eat more. I see you are so thin. Are you too tired from working at G's?" "Thank you, uncle." When Jisha was mentioned, Xiao Tongyu instantly understood. In addition to wanting the money from the sale of the remaining shares in Xiao Tongyu's hands, the Lin family may also want to get in touch with Ji Yunze through her. Thinking of Ji Yunze, she suddenly felt a pain and felt that she could not sit still. At this time, Lin Xiao put down his chopsticks and said, "Tong Tong, can you please talk to me for a moment?" Xiao Tongyu stood up suspiciously and followed Lin Xiao to the stairs in the corner of the living room. Lin Xiao looked down at the little girl who used to run behind him. Her delicate face was light pink, her big eyes were watery, and her cheeks were still full of baby fat, making her look pure and sexy. Who would have thought that she, who was not very noticeable when she was a child, would grow up to be so beautiful? Any man would be attracted to her. Lin Xiao, what's the matter? Xiao Tongyu spoke in a calm tone without a trace of emotion. You figured out why my parents asked you to come back for dinner, right? Lin Xiao stared at her face, unable to move his eyes away. Well, so do you consider it? Lin Xiao took a step closer to her. We can give it a try. Xiao Tongyu almost laughed out loud. What did the Lin family think of her? After her parents passed away, she really regarded Uncle Lin and Aunt Yuan as her own family, but reality gave her blows again and again. They turned a blind eye when they saw her being bullied at school, with her school bag and exercise books torn and her hair pulled when she was writhing in pain from gastroenteritis. They just gave her some medicine to get by. The Lin family seldom gave her pocket money, and even the birthday present for Lin Xiao was bought with the money she saved from secretly working. If it weren't for the kind-hearted lawyer who kept her share of the property until she came of age, it might have been swallowed up by the Lin family long ago. Are you crazy, Lin Xiao? Go ask Qin Mengyang for help. You two still have a past relationship. Why do you have to ask me for help? In your eyes, I am worse than a dog. I know I was wrong, Tong Tong. It was my fault before. I was deceived and met the wrong person. Can you give me a chance? Lin Xiao's voice was a little choked, and he reached out to grab Xiao Tongyu. She instinctively stepped back with a look of extreme disgust. She was so stupid. She had given the Lin family countless chances, but her sincerity was trampled on time and time again. Xiao Tongyu is not an idiot, she can still tell the difference between sincerity and falsehood. The money that the Xiao family got in exchange for half of the shares was enough to repay the Lin family for raising her. You think too much, Lin Xiao. My relationship with your Lin family is over. Lin Xiao stared at her blankly, his body trembling slightly. He always thought that he was Xiao Tongyu's idol and could call her to come and go at will. He didn't care about her at all. But when Xiao Tongyu flatly rejected him and turned to leave, he found that he could not accept it. Seeing that Lin Xiao didn't react at all, Xiao Tongyu turned around and walked to the restaurant. At this time, her cell phone rang. She looked down and saw that it was Yunze. I'm sorry, Uncle Lin, Aunt Yuan, I just remembered that I have something else to do. I'll come to see you again when I have the chance. After saying that, she picked up her bag and walked towards the door. She will never come back to this home again. Lin Qianhao and Yuan Qing stared at Xiao Tongyu's departing back, feeling uneasy. Qianhao, this girl from the Xiao family wouldn't know what happened back then, right? Lin Qianhao clenched his fists, his fingertips turning white. How is that possible? She wouldn't know. Chapter 6 Another Million. Presidential suite of the Royal Capital Hotel. The woman had taken off all her clothes and stood naked in front of Yunze. She is a famous socialite in the circle of the second-generation rich in the imperial capital. She is the dream of many men and the beloved one that cannot be obtained even with money. Usually, she just accompanied people for drinks and never stayed overnight. Tonight, Han Yu found her and asked if she was willing to spend the night with Yunze. She agreed without thinking. That was Yunze, a man standing at the top of the pyramid of the entire imperial capital. It was said that he never approached women, so was he attracted to her? At this time, Yunze was sitting on the sofa smoking. He glanced at the woman's naked body, and his heart was calm. The woman hesitated, then walked closer to him and sat on his lap. Any woman would be moved by this perfect and handsome face. She hugged Yunze's neck and called out tenderly, Master Ji. Yunze frowned and snuffed out the cigarette in his hand. The next second, he tightly grasped the woman's wrist and threw her to the ground with force. Get out, he said lightly. Master Ji. The woman looked at him in shock, not knowing what she had done wrong. He was the one who had called her here, and he was the one who had asked her to leave. Get lost. Yunze didn't want to say another word. Mr. Ji. I won't leave. As the most famous socialite in the capital, how could she endure such a humiliation as being stripped naked and kicked out? Yunze stood up, grabbed the woman's arm and dragged her to the door of the room. His force was so great that she felt her wrist was dislocated. Put on some clothes and get out, or I'll throw you out like this. Seeing Yunze's face full of anger, the woman put on her clothes and ran out of the door crying. After the woman left, Yunze felt uncomfortable all over in the room. He felt like he was about to explode with irritation. It seems that he is not suitable for every woman. He dialed Xiao Tongyu's number. "Mr. G, what can I do for you?" Her sweet voice came from the phone. "In half an hour, we will be at the presidential suite of the Imperial Capital Hotel." After saying that, Yunze hung up the phone. When Xiao Tongyu ran to the door of the suite panting, he felt like he was about to fall apart. She endured the pain and knocked on the door. Yunze opened the door. His face was so dark that it seemed as if ink could drip out. "Secretary Xiao, you are 3 minutes late." "I'm sorry, Mr. G. I was quite far away from here just now. I drove here as soon as I received your call." Yunze didn't say anything. He took out his mobile phone and operated it skillfully. The next second, there was a ding sound of a text message alert. Xiao Tongyu looked down and saw that there was a message in her bank account. "Another million more. Mr. G, this." Thinking of what happened last night, she was so scared that her legs were shaking a little. "What? Not enough?" "No, Mr. G, I'm not short of money." Xiao Tongyu was really about to collapse. "Yunze, you can get any woman you want, why do you keep holding on to her?" Yunze walked forward and pinched her small face. "Don't want to do it. Why are you seducing me?" His strength was too great, and Xiao Tongyu felt like crying. She grabbed Yunze's arm with a little pleading. "Boss G, I'm in pain, it really hurts, can I wait for 2 days?" Seeing the light in her eyes again, her eyelashes fluttering, and her as obedient as a kitten drenched in the rain, Yunze's heart trembled and he let go. Xiao Tongyu was so scared that she quickly took a few steps back. She felt that if she stayed with him any longer, she would die sooner or later. At this time, Yunze caught a glimpse of Xiao Tongyu's open backpack, revealing a plastic bag with the logo of the Imperial Capital Hospital. "Go take a shower." He opened his mouth. "Are taking a shower? Didn't you let her go? Why are you going to take a shower?" "Not willing." "No, Mr. G, I'll go wash it right away." Xiao Tongyu quickly turned around and hid in the bathroom. This was the great devil Yunze. If he didn't listen to what he said, he might not even be able to find his body after he died. "I'm going to die anyway, so I'll just die. If it hurts, I'll die in pain. At worst, I can just take some painkillers prescribed by the hospital before I die." After taking a shower, Xiao Tongyu walked to the bed in the hotel bathrobe. Yunze had already finished taking a shower in another bathroom in the suite and was lying on the bed. He glanced at her. At this time, Xiao Tongyu took off her makeup, revealing her fair, soft, collagen-filled face. Her waist-length black hair was put aside, and water droplets were hanging on her slender swan neck. Yunze couldn't help but feel his lower abdomen tighten, and his whole body began to stir. It was really weird. The woman who was just chased away took off all her clothes, but he couldn't react at all. He was just filled with disgust. Yunze lazily patted the place beside him. "Come here and take off your bathrobe." "Are you really going to do this?" Xiao Tongyu suddenly felt like he was torn in two. She climbed onto the bed with despair and took off her bathrobe. "Open your legs." Yunze's voice was low and magnetic. Xiao Tongyu closed her eyes. She probably wouldn't survive the night. Suddenly, she felt a cold sensation in her lower body. She half raised her body and saw Yunze lying between her legs, carefully using a cotton swab to apply medicine. Ointment. Xiao Tongyu jumped up at once. "Boss G, I can do it myself. Can you see?" I'll try." "Secretary Xiao has this skill, why doesn't he go to the circus?" Yunze stared at her, and the smile on his lips gradually dimmed. Having been with him for so long, Xiao Tongyu immediately understood that this was an order and could not be refuted. Her face flushed, and she lay down again, letting Yunze do whatever he wanted. At this moment, she was so ashamed that she wanted to bury her head in the mattress and suffocate herself. About 5 minutes later, Yunze raised his head. He held the small tube of ointment and shook it in front of Xiao Tongyu. "Leave this here with me." His meaning was very clear. "If you want to apply the ointment, come to me." Xiao Tongyu nodded, quickly put on his bathrobe and stood back beside the bed. Then, if Mr. G is okay. She mustered up the courage to ask, fearing that Yunze, who had just decided to let her go, would change his mind the next second. Yunze pointed to the place beside him. Sleep here tonight. Xiao Tongyu felt dizzy. What did this mean? Just sleeping with him? Simply covering each other with a blanket and chatting? Mr. G also had this hobby? Yunze looked at the innocent and sweet little face. Xiao Tongyu, who had taken off her makeup, looked as young as a college student. He simply didn't want to let her go back. I can't touch her today, she's in pain. Damn it, Yunze actually feels sorry for women. After frowning for a moment, Xiao Tongyu smiled and her eyes met Yunze's dark eyes. Okay, Mr. G, I'll take care of things first and then come. She walked to the living room, picked up the suit and trousers that Yunze had changed out of, and put them into their hotel's special laundry bag. Then she called room service and asked someone to pick up the clothes, and also booked breakfast for him to be delivered to the room the next morning. Because Yunze doesn't like eating in a buffet restaurant with a lot of people. Xiao Tongyu had memoized his taste. American coffee must be 60 degrees, eggs must be fried on the sunny side up and can be eaten raw, toast must be thick cut from Dream Power, and butter must be French Bordeaux. Yunze was half lying on the bed, watching Xiao Tongyu's smooth operation, and seemed to be thinking about something. After everything was done, Xiao Tongyu walked to the bed, carefully lifted the quilt, and lay down next to Yunze. She lay sideways with her back to him. She was hugging the edge of the 2-meter-long bed, occupying only a small corner. Last night, he fainted from the pain, and tonight, he couldn't sleep because of the fear. Xiao Tongyu felt that if he continued like this, the dark circles under his eyes might grow onto his cheeks. Suddenly, she felt a powerful force grabbing the back collar of her bathrobe and dragging her over. The next second, her waist was tightly embraced. Turn off the lights, Yunze said. Chapter 7 Drilling Wood to Make Fire. Xiao Tongyu stretched out his hand to the head of the bed, and after a while of searching, the whole room quickly fell into darkness. Yunze glanced at the troublesome bathrobe on Xiao Tongyu with some disgust. Why was the material so rough? He would remind Hanyu to change them all tomorrow. He roughly pulled off her bathrobe, and her upper body was instantly exposed. Then, he leaned his head on her shoulder, and the smooth, soft and delicate touch of her skin made him feel comfortable. Xiao Tongyu couldn't help but shudder all over and closed his eyes tightly, but he couldn't fall asleep at all. Why did you seduce me? Yunze's cold voice came from the back of her neck. Which woman wouldn't be moved by a man like Mr. G? Xiao Tongyu still had her back to him, afraid that he would see through her if she turned around. To be honest. As Yunze spoke, his hand slowly reached into the inside of Xiao Tongyu's thigh. This woman looks thin, with nice breasts and buttocks, and a slender waist that seems like it can be pinched with one hand, and all the flesh grows in the right places. I'm telling the truth, President G. Xiao Tongyu replied sweetly. Yunze's hand stroked back and forth on the inside of her thigh, and the next second, he pinched the softest piece of flesh. One last chance. R. Xiao Tongyu couldn't help but scream out in pain. Explain. At this moment, she knew that if she didn't tell the truth, she would die here immediately. Since you're going to die anyway, why not give it a try? Thinking of this, Xiao Tongyu turned over, faced Yunze, and put his arms around his neck. The next second, she kissed his lips. She had never had a first kiss, so her kiss was awkward, even clumsy. Suddenly, he tasted Xiao Tongyu's bright and sweet lips again. Yunze held the back of her head tightly with his strong hands and responded with a more fierce and unbridled kiss. He rolled over and pressed on top of her. It doesn't hurt anymore. It hurts, but I want to. Then change the posture. A night of extreme passion. When Xiao Tongyu woke up the next morning, he felt that the pain was not as severe as yesterday. Was it the ointment that worked, or was Yunze being intentionally gentle, or had she already adapted to this state? Thinking of this, Xiao Tongyu quickly shook his head. She would rather believe that it was the superb medical skills of the Imperial Capital Hospital. Maybe it was because it was too early, Yunze beside him was still asleep. Xiao Tongyu moved closer to him, looked at it carefully, and felt that all this was so incredible. How many women in the capital want to climb into bed with this man with this impeccably handsome face? But in the end, the one lying next to him is actually an ordinary person like me. Why? Is it because I am obedient and sleep better? When will Yunze let her go? Xiao Tongyu felt uncomfortable when he thought about the extra 1 million yuan in his bank account yesterday. She felt like it was a deal, she was selling herself. If she meets a man she loves and who truly loves her in the future, will she have the courage to tell him about this? No, she wanted the money back. But what fool would go against money? That's right, she, Xiao Tongyu, is that fool. Thinking of this, she picked up the mobile phone on the bedside table and transferred the 2 million back to Yunze intact. Bite. The sound of the text message alert made Yunze open his eyes. After taking a look at his phone, he sat up. The quilt slid off his body, revealing his broad shoulders, narrow waist, and well-proportioned abdominal muscles. Secretary Xiao, transfer money to me after sleeping with me. Am I a duck? Seeing Yunze's gloomy face, Xiao Tongyu suddenly regretted it. No, Mr. Ji, you gave me too much, I don't deserve it. Yunze stared at her face, as if he wanted to see through her. This woman doesn't want money, but sex. Or, is she playing hard to get, preparing to play the long game and finally marry into the Ji family as a young lady? He curled his lips and smiled. Interesting, then I'll play with you. Seeing that Yunze actually smiled, with a ruffian-like air in that smile, Xiao Tongyu immediately realized that something was wrong after staying by his side for so long. Yunze stared at Xiao Tongyu's face. She looked even more rosy and tender without makeup, as if water could be squeezed out of her. That palm-sized little face was moaning softly under him last night, and on this fine morning, he suddenly became beastly again. How can I let her go? Since Secretary Xiao has given the money, I can't accept it for nothing. Xiao Tongyu's body tensed up, and he instinctively took 2 steps back while hugging the quilt. Then give it back to me, I won't give it to you. Yunze stood up and moved closer to her, and the quilt on his body completely slipped off. Although she had seen it many times, but seeing him naked in broad daylight still made Xiao Tongyu's face turn red all the way to her ears. Damn it, if this continues, I won't even have enough money to buy a box of birth control pills. Yunze pressed on her and gently pinched her tender little face. Be good, open your mouth. After washing up and waiting for Yunze to finish breakfast, Xiao Tongyu planned to go home. After all, she didn't change her clothes yesterday, nor did she bring any makeup, so it was inappropriate to go to work directly. Boss Ji, can I take an hour off this morning? I want to go back and change my clothes. Xiao Tongyu hasn't slept at home for 2 consecutive days. He just wants to take a whole day off and have a good sleep. It would be best if he could find that everything was just a dream after waking up. Yunze was sitting on the sofa looking at his tablet computer and nodded. He had already changed into a clean suit and combed his bangs with hairspray. Yunze seemed to have regained his appearance as the president of G Group. Xiao Tongyu reached out to open the door, and as soon as he stepped out of the room, he saw Han Yu and Luo Juanji sitting on the sofa in the lounge at the entrance of the presidential suite. Secretary Xiao. They were both surprised to see Xiao Tongyu. She was a little embarrassed. Coming out of Yunze's suite early in the morning, she said nothing happened, and she herself didn't believe it. Luo Juanji whispered to Han Yu, "Where is that woman from yesterday?" Han Yu, do you still need to ask? Early this morning, the two of them came to the Imperial Capital Hotel and waited at the door of the suite, wanting to see what tricks Yunze would play when he took the initiative to ask for a woman for the first time. This time, Yunze really played it too big and performed a magic trick. Luo Juanji looked at Xiao Tongyu's face. She had no makeup on, her long hair casually draped over her shoulders, and her big eyes under her bangs sparkled with seductive light. She was sweeter and more attractive than those women with heavy makeup. No wonder Yunze couldn't control himself. Mr. Han, Mr. Luo, what a coincidence. President Ji is in the room. I'll take you in. Xiao Tongyu smiled professionally. Oh, no need. We are just curious. It's okay to ask you, Luo Juanji's eyes revealed cunning. How many times did Yunze do it last night? Xiao Tongyu felt like her head was about to explode, and she just wanted to find a crack to crawl into. Han Yu gently pushed Luo Juanji and said, Secretary Xiao, ignore him. It's nothing. We'll leave first. Just then, the door was opened and Yunze leaned against the door with his hands in his pockets. He opened his lips faintly, 5 times, including this morning, a total of 7 times. Xiao Tongyu was petrified instantly. She only remembered that Yunze kept asking for more, and finally she was so tired that she completely lost her memory. Luo Juanji opened his mouth wide. Damn it, Yunze, are you trying to make fire by rubbing 2 sticks together? And the night before last, do you want to hear it? Xiao Tongyu felt she was too embarrassed to continue listening to their conversation. Mr. G, Mr. Han, Mr. Luo, you guys chat, I'm leaving first. After saying that, she rushed into the elevator as if escaping. Chapter 8 My best friend, Zhuang Shufei. After being busy for the whole morning, Xiao Tongyu didn't even have time to drink a sip of water. Because she had been on a crazy diet, her stomach was not in good condition to begin with. In addition, she did not have time to eat breakfast today, so she now felt a dull pain in her upper abdomen. That's right, in the morning at the Imperial Hotel, when Yunze was having breakfast, she stood aside and watched. He didn't let her sit down and eat with him. After all, Xiao Tongyu was just the object for him to vent his desires, and she was not qualified to have dinner with Yunze. Seeing that her face was not very good, Suru asked her, Tong, what's wrong with you? It's okay, maybe I'm hungry and my stomach hurts a little. Xiao Tongyu answered indifferently while sorting out Yunze's business trip itinerary for the next 2 days. She was busy as a dog during the day, and had to sleep with him at night, and there was no overtime pay. Even if she was crippled by sleep, it was not considered a work injury. Was she, Xiao Tongyu, an idiot? Why did she return the 2 million to Yunze? Suru quietly handed Xiao Tongyu a pack of biscuits from under the table. Do you want to eat it? This is super delicious, caramel flavor. Xiao Tongyu smiled sweetly at her, eat. She reached out and took a biscuit and was about to put it in her mouth when suddenly. Knock knock knock. A slender white hand knocked on the table. Xiao Tongyu, I caught you eating snacks while working, didn't I? Xiao Tongyu raised his head and saw a beautiful woman with seaweed-like chestnut curly hair standing in front of the desk. She had a small face as big as a palm, wore sunglasses, had delicate makeup, and her beautiful red lips seemed to be dripping with blood. Xiao Tongyu rolled her eyes at her with disdain. What does it have to do with you? The woman was so angry that she took off her sunglasses. Hey Xiao Tongyu, are you getting bolder? At that moment, Suru, who was standing by, saw who was coming. She covered her mouth in shock. Zhuang Shufei. That's right, the person who came was the latest popular young actress, Zhuang Shufei. Xiao Tongyu smiled and gestured to her to speak softly. When did you come back? Why did you come to my company? Zhuang Shufei held up his sunglasses and patted her face. I flew for more than 10 hours and came here just after getting off the plane. I came here specially to see my little beauty. Xiao Tongyu introduced to Suru, my best friend, Zhuang Shufei. Suru was pleasantly surprised. Your best friend is actually a big star? Then, does she know that you were beaten by Qin Mengyang yesterday? She can avenge you. Zhuang Shufei glared and yelled, what did you say? Qin Mengyang, that bitch, beat my woman. Seeing that it was time for lunch break, Xiao Tongyu hurriedly pulled Zhuang Shufei out. Keep your voice down, aren't you afraid of President Ji? I'm not his employee, why should I be afraid of him? The two came to a Western restaurant near the company. Zhuang Shufei's TV series was recently on the air and had a high viewership. In order to avoid being recognized and causing unnecessary trouble, they chose a seat in a corner of the restaurant and sat down. After ordering the dishes, Zhuang Shufei asked with concern, Tong, what's the matter with what your colleague said just now, that bitch Qin Mengyang beat you? Xiao Tongyu said lightly, it's nothing. She came to see President Ji. I said President Ji was in a meeting. She thought I was deliberately stopping her and slapped me. This bitch. It seems that the resources I have taken away are not enough, Zhuang Shufei said as she took out her cell phone. I'll go find Sister Wang. Sister Wang is Zhuang Shufei's agent and has been working with her for several years. She is always dedicated to her and always responds to her requests. Xiao Tongyu quickly stopped her. Forget it, I don't want to fight with her. Zhuang Shufei rolled her eyes at her, with an expression that said, why are you just letting it go like this? Zhuang Shufei had lived abroad since she was a child. After returning to China in her second year of high school, she transferred to the aristocratic school where Xiao Tongyu was. At that time, Lin Xiao and Qin Mengyang had already graduated, but because Xiao Tongyu had been bullied before, she had almost no friends in school. I don't know why Zhuang Shufei, who is beautiful and the famous daughter of the Zhuang group, would become friends with the unknown Xiao Tongyu. Maybe it was because she had watched too many martial arts movies and was particularly brave and righteous, or maybe it was because she felt sympathy for Xiao Tongyu who always ate alone in the corner. One day at noon, she took the initiative to talk to Xiao Tongyu in the cafeteria. Classmate, today is Valentine's Day, can I treat you to chocolate? Thanks to Zhuang Shufei, Xiao Tongyu's life became happy afterwards. At least she made good friends. I have been a good friend for so many years. The food came and Zhuang Shufei started to devour it like a wolf pouncing on its prey. Xiao Tongyu found it funny. Fei Fei, how many days have you been hungry? Zhuang Shufei puffed out her mouth full of food and said incoherently, I've been starving for 2 months for this play. It's finally finished, shouldn't I have a big meal? If the paparazzi took pictures of you like this, you might become a hot topic again. Go ahead and shoot. My dad is capable of helping me take it down anyway. At this point, Zhuang Shufei suddenly thought of something, and she swallowed all the food. Tong Tong, guess who went to see my dad the other day? Who is it? Your Uncle Lin and that bastard Lin Xiao. Xiao Tongyu was curious, what do they want to see Uncle Zhuang for? What else can I do? Borrow money. Xiao Tongyu was a little surprised. She knew that Lin's recent financial situation was not good, but she didn't expect that it would come to the point where it had to borrow money from other companies. Although Lin Xiao and Qin Mengyang had already graduated when Zhuang Shufei transferred to the school, she knew everything about them and how the Lin family treated Xiao Tongyu. She even hoped that they would fall into poverty and be exiled to the frontier. Did Uncle Zhuang borrow it? Borrow your money, Lin's is a bottomless pit. If my father dares to borrow money, I will never marry and make him so angry that he lies in a coffin. This Zhuang Shufei just likes to talk nonsense and speak without thinking. But Xiao Tongyu likes her like this. You know what, Fei Fei, the Lin family asked me to go back 2 days ago. Zhuang Shufei raised her head abruptly. Are they interested in the inheritance your father left you? Xiao Tongyu nodded. Lin Xiao also let me stay with him. Is he crazy? You wish. Tong Tong, do you agree? How is that possible? Am I an idiot? They treated me like a dog, and now I am so cheap as to stick to their house. Seeing Xiao Tongyu so determined, Zhuang Shufei breathed a sigh of relief. But thinking carefully, Xiao Tongyu was so smart and intelligent, he didn't look like a love-brained person. Okay, eat quickly and then go back to sleep. You haven't adjusted to the jet lag yet, right? Xiao Tongyu said as she stretched out her hand to tie up her long hair. Maybe it was too hot in the corner. In this cool autumn weather, she actually felt a little sweaty. It would have been fine if she didn't tie her hair up, but once she tied her hair up, the red marks on the jawline on both sides of her neck were eye-catching, and looked particularly eye-catching against Xiao Tongyu's fair skin. Plop. Zhuang Shufei's fork fell onto the table. Tong Tong, your neck. Xiao Tongyu suddenly realized that something was wrong. She quickly let down her hair and blushed. You, with whom? Xiao Tongyu felt that the matter could no longer be concealed, and she was very foresighted and took away all the cutlery and food from Zhuang Shufei's hands. Then, she whispered, Fei Fei, I'm going to tell you something. Don't be surprised and don't shout out. What's up? Yunze slept with me. There was a loud bang and Zhuang Shufei lost her balance and fell off the dining table. Chapter 9. You want to run. You're dreaming. Such a sudden loud noise caused everyone around to turn around and look at Zhuang Shufei. Xiao Tongyu quickly stood up and helped her up, fearing that she would be recognized and cause a commotion. After sitting down again, Zhuang Shufei still couldn't calm down. She gulped down the juice at hand and looked at Xiao Tongyu seriously. What's going on? Xiao Tongyu hesitated for a moment, then told her best friend everything. After hearing this, Zhuang Shufei was struck by lightning. Xiao Tongyu. Are you an idiot? Yunze is such a terrible man, do you think you can just withdraw from him? For a mere Qin Mengyang, why bother? Even if you do nothing, Yunze will not pay any attention to her. Xiao Tongyu regretted, I didn't know he would really take the bait. I've been working with him for a year, and has never looked for a woman. Zhuang Shufei's eyes widened, why won't you take the bait? Isn't this a bait? How many times have you done it with him? Just this morning, yesterday and the night before, probably, a dozen times. Zhuang Shufei's eyes suddenly darkened, fuck. This Yunze really doesn't treat you as a human being. No wonder you are in so much pain that you have to go to the doctor. Well, why don't you quit your job and come work at my dad's company? Or, haven't you always wanted to open your own design studio? You can use the money your dad left for you, or if the money is not enough, I can give it to you. Xiao Tongyu bit her lips and said nothing. It's not that she hasn't thought about resigning, but the question is, will Yunze let her resign? Let me think about it. Don't think about it. If you keep thinking about it, you won't even know how you died. If he continues to do this, the birth control pills will poison you? Well, poisoning from birth control pills, that's a pretty new way to die. Zhuang Shufei hit the nail on the head. If he really loves you, he will wear a condom instead of asking you to take birth control pills. Xiao Tongyu nodded. I know, he doesn't treat me as a human being. And I'm not saying this to you, but why the hell did you return the 2 million to him? Who would complain about having too much money? Zhuang Shufei was really pissed off by her best friend. Looking at Xiao Tongyu's soft and tender little face, even her cold and aloof brother was moved. How could such a fool as her not realize this? If my brother knew about this, he would probably explode right there. By the way, Tong, my brother is going back to China. Xiao Tongyu's dark eyes suddenly lit up. Brother Xu Jie is going back to China. Zhuang Shufei's elder brother Zhuang Shujie was sent abroad by his father Zhuang Yang to develop a branch of the Zhuang group. He has been away for nearly 2 years. Now the branch is progressing smoothly and has found a reliable manager. Recently, he is finally coming back. Zhuang Shujie has liked Xiao Tongyu for a long time, but Xiao Tongyu, a woman with negative emotional intelligence, didn't seem to notice it at all. He didn't let Zhuang Shufei say anything, and just kept wasting time. Zhuang Shufei advised, so you should resign quickly, come back to be my brother's secretary, or open your own design studio. It's better than dying in Ji Yunze's bed, right? Ji Yunze is a man who can cover the sky with one hand. Even if you die in his bed, he will find a way to make you disappear without a trace, and even your body can't be found. After hearing what Zhuang Shufei said, Xiao Tongyu was so scared that she shivered all over, and she felt cold sweat starting to appear on her forehead. Okay, she said with determination. After lunch break, Xiao Tongyu returned to the office and asked Su Ru in a low voice, is President Ji in the office? Yes, he also eats lunch in the office and has never come out. He's alone. Su Ru nodded. Yes, what's wrong, Tong? I'm going to resign. Xiao Tongyu knocked on the door and went in. Ji Yunze was lying on the big sofa in the lounge inside the office with his eyes closed. She walked to the coffee table next to the sofa and put away all the tableware for Ji Yunze's lunch. Ever since he became Ji Yunze's personal secretary, Xiao Tongyu has ordered lunch for him every day. Xiao Tongyu knew his favorite restaurants and dishes, and would select the freshest ingredients according to the season. So in the past year, Ji Yunze never threw the food on the ground out of dissatisfaction. She deliberately slowed down her pace, but Ji Yunze showed no sign of waking up. Forget it, let us talk about it later. Xiao Tongyu picked up the cutlery and was about to walk out when her wrist was suddenly grabbed by Ji Yunze. What's the matter? Ji Yunze opened his eyes. Boss Ji, nothing happened. Explain. Boss Ji, it's really nothing. Secretary Xiao deliberately packed up so slowly and kept glancing at me. Is there something wrong? It turned out that Ji Yunze was not asleep, he saw everything she did. Xiao Tongyu put down the cutlery in his hand and deliberately moved back. Mr. Ji, I want to resign. A flash of hostility flashed across Ji Yunze's eyes. Why? I studied architectural design in college, and I've always wanted to open my own design studio. Now I have this opportunity. Ji Yunze said coldly, who gave you the chance? Let me ask you, who gave you the opportunity? I found an office in a great location at a reasonable price. The address. I bought that building. Xiao Tongyu was speechless. It's not that Ji Yunze is incapable of doing such a thing. Secretary Xiao, do you think you can open a studio in the capital without my permission? Xiao Tongyu felt as if a thunder exploded above his head, and his whole body was blown to pieces. Ji Yunze, why are you holding on to her? If you have nothing else to do, go out and send me your business trip itinerary for the next 2 days. After finally making up his mind, Xiao Tongyu was sent away like this. He was really unwilling. Boss Ji, can't you just let me go? I'm injured at work. Ji Yunze stared at her straight, a sly smile on his face. Based on Xiao Tongyu's understanding of him, every time Ji Yunze smiled like this, it was the end of him. Oh? Let me see where Secretary Xiao got injured. Before she could react, Ji Yunze pulled her into his arms, and when she turned over, he pressed her firmly under him, with a powerful force tightly grasping her wrist. Xiao Tongyu struggled desperately, but the man on her didn't move at all. Boss Ji, this is the office. When Secretary Xiao put his hand on my leg, why didn't you think this was an office? As she spoke, Xiao Tongyu's skirt was pushed up to her waist, revealing her two white and slender legs. Yunze's Adam's apple couldn't stop rolling up and down. He originally just wanted to scare the woman in front of him, but who knew that it would arouse his own desire? He just felt a burning desire all over his body. Xiao Tongyu bit her lips angrily, and mist gradually covered her eyes. In front of Yunze, she really doesn't even have the qualifications to be a good person. Boss G, aren't you afraid that I won't take birth control pills and get pregnant with your child? Oh, this woman is so bold that she actually threatened me, Yunze. He glanced at her playfully. Secretary Xiao, do you think you can keep something I don't want? At this time, there was a knock on the door. Mr. G, it's time to go to the consulate. Wu Yang said outside the door. Yunze stood up, and Xiao Tongyu quickly pulled down her miniskirt and tidied up her messy hair. Come in. Wu Yang walked in. Xiao Tongyu quickly picked up the tableware on the table, nodded and greeted him, and walked quickly out the door. When he turned sideways, Wu Yang clearly saw the red marks on her fair neck and the tears that had not yet been wiped away from the corners of her eyes. Did you see it? Yunze pulled his tie. Wu Yang asked, what did you see, President G? It's nothing, just see it. Wu Yang was a little surprised. Did President G directly admit his relationship with Xiao Tongyu? And looking at Xiao Tongyu's expression, was she forced? Yunze had been the CEO of G Corporation for 7 years. From the age of 22 to 29, Wu Yang had never seen him looking for a woman. Unexpectedly. Lost your virginity. Wu Yang, don't worry, President G, I will keep it a secret. Yeah. Yunze lit a cigarette and looked out the window with a complicated expression. Xiao Tongyu, you want to run away? Dream on. Chapter 10 Is your thing injured? After work, Xiao Tongyu received a WeChat message from Zhuang Shufei. How's it going, Tong Tong? Did you successfully resign? No, I'll think of a way. Zhuang Shufei, damn it. I knew it. How could Yunze let you go so easily? Xiao Tongyu put down his phone and leaned on the desk with his head down. She didn't know why, but she felt so tired and wanted to cry. I miss Mom and Dad so much. Why not go to the cemetery to see them this weekend? Xiao Tongyu was also in the car when the accident happened. If her mother hadn't protected her tightly, she would have died with them. She still remembers clearly the feeling of suffocation when her mother hugged her tightly when she was 11 years old. My mother died on the spot. My father was in the hospital for several days but eventually passed away with my mother. So that's why she never liked to button her collar, because it would suffocate her and remind her of the car accident and her parents. If she could have followed them back then, she wouldn't have been living under someone else's roof, being looked down upon, being bullied at school, and being used as a sexual object by Yunze now. Her life would have been less painful and filled with only the joy of childhood. At this moment, I heard the sound of fingers tapping on the table. Secretary Xiao. Xiao Tongyu raised his head and saw Yunze standing in front of the desk. Seeing Xiao Tongyu's red eyes and tears on her pink little face, Yunze was stunned for a moment. He felt his heart being tugged hard. Xiao Tongyu, why is she crying? Was it because it hurt? Because she didn't want to have sex with him? Or because he wouldn't let her quit? Mr. G. Xiao Tongyu wiped his face roughly. What about the business trip? Yunze stared at her face. Every time he looked at her for another second, he felt as if his heart skipped a beat. I'm sorry, Mr. G, because the hotel information you booked has changed. I just made a new copy and sent it to you. Xiao Tongyu said as he picked up the folder on the table. I'll print another copy for you. Yes. Yunze took the folder. If Mr. G has nothing else to do, I'll leave work first. Xiao Tongyu bowed slightly to him. Just as she was about to turn around, Yunze asked a question that he had never said to a woman in his 29 years of life. Let's have dinner together. As soon as he finished speaking, even he himself was shocked. Yunze, subconsciously, was actually inviting a woman to dinner. Xiao Tongyu frowned in confusion, wondering if she was hallucinating. I'm sorry, Mr. G, can you say it again? Nothing. Yunze took the folder and turned into the office. Yunze sat in the back seat of the Rolls-Royce, and Wu Yang drove him to Ji's house. Along the way, Yunze did not speak. He crossed his legs, tapped the armrest of the back seat with his fingers rhythmically, and his expression was as cold as ever. For the first time ever, he did not read the documents in the car, but looked out the window. My heart felt like it was being disturbed by something, and I had an indescribable discomfort. Could it be that after spending 2 nights with Xiao Tongyu, he became addicted? A black Rolls-Royce drove into a private villa halfway up the mountain. The villa is built on a hillside. It takes 10 minutes to drive from the Golden Relief Gate to the main entrance of the villa. Along the way, there are green lawns, towering poplar trees, and various colorful flowers. Just taking care of these flowers and plants requires a lot of manpower and resources. There is no other villa like this in the imperial capital where every inch of land is valuable. Yunze usually lives in the villa area in the center of the imperial city. His grandfather and parents live in Ji's house. He is usually very busy with work and only comes back once in a long time. He got out of the car, pushed open the door of the villa's hall, and walked in with his long legs. Mother Qianshu was sitting on the national standard mahogany sofa in the living room drinking tea. She was wearing a black silk dress and her hair was tied up high, looking elegant and dignified. She blew gently on the English black tea in the cup without looking at Yunze. "Are you willing to come back?" she said calmly. Qianshu has a petite face and fair skin, and is a natural beauty. Yunze's eyebrows and eyes look very similar to hers. "Mom." Yunze greeted her casually, then sat on the sofa and crossed his legs. Qianshu glanced at him. From this glance, she could tell that her son was in a bad mood today. She whispered, "Put your legs down." Qianshu was the eldest daughter of the famous Qian family in Jiangcheng since she was a child. She married into the Ji family with money. She had the temperament of a lady from a noble family in her every move, and she had also been strict with Yunze since she was a child. If we talk about the only woman in the world who can make Yunze obedient, it is probably Qianshu. He put his legs down helplessly and turned around to look around. "Where's Dad?" "I went to D City to participate in a golf tournament." "Where's Grandpa?" "I'm going to arrange a blind date for you." Yunze's face darkened. Since Mr. Ji retired from the position of president of Ji Group more than 10 years ago, he has not had any special hobbies. Apart from practicing calligraphy, growing flowers, and playing with birds, he has been looking for a granddaughter-in-law for himself. "I never get tired of it." At this time, the door was opened and butler's son welcomed Mr. Ji in. Old Master Ji has white hair and a youthful face, and he looks very energetic. When he saw Yunze coming home, he immediately smiled like a flower, and the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes deepened a lot. Yunze stood up. "Grandpa. Are you back, Yunze? How's the girl from the Qin family that I introduced to you last time?" When Qin Mengyang was mentioned, Yunze's mind immediately emerged with Xiao Tongyu's little face that was beaten red. He couldn't help but be startled again. "Damn, what is he doing crazy again?" Yunze immediately said seriously, "Grandpa, did you ask her to come to the company to find me?" "Yes." No wonder Yunze was still wondering who gave her the courage to break into his office so brazenly. "I kicked her out because she beat up my secretary. I bought a trending search to punish her." Mr. Ji almost lost his grip on the cane he was leaning on. Qianshu chuckled, "Dad, don't make trouble. This kid has no plans to find a girlfriend." Anger rose on Mr. Ji's face, and his voice became louder. "Not looking for a girlfriend. Our Ji family is such a big company, and it's gone because of him." Qianshu was not in a hurry at all. He has no interest in women, and you can't do anything even if you put a knife to his neck. Yunze thought, "Not interested in women? It seems not." Mr. Ji was so angry that he had a headache. He turned around and went upstairs. "Call me when dinner is ready." After Mr. Ji left, Yunze sat back on the sofa and impatiently picked up the orange on the table and began to peel it. His slender and bony fingers brushed across the orange peels, as if he was casting a work of art. Qianshu stared at his son with eyes wide open in disbelief. He, who had always been a germaphobe, was actually peeling an orange with his bare hands. It seems that his mood is indeed not a bit bad. The orange juice dyed Yunze's clean nails yellow. He took out a handkerchief from his pocket with disdain. Boom. With a slight sound, something was taken out of his pocket along with his handkerchief. Qianshu bent down to pick it up and took a look, then gave Yunze a meaningful look. "Is your thing injured?" Yunze turned around and saw that Qianshu was holding the ointment that Xiao Tongyu had. He tucked it carelessly into his pocket as he left his hotel suite in the morning and then completely forgot about it. The 4 big red words, "for gynecological use only," on the ointment are eye-catching and extremely eye-catching. Yunze stretched out his hand to Qianshu. Mom, give it back to me. Qianshu put the ointment on his hand and said, not only is your thing injured, but your sex has also changed. Yunze ignored her and put the ointment into his pocket. At this time, butler's son came over and said, Madam, Master, it's time to eat. Qianshu stood up, turned around and said to Yunze, don't mess around. New. Chapter 11. Sooner or later, he will die in Yunze's hands. Office of the President of G Group. When it was almost time to get off work, Luo Juanji put his hands in his pockets and walked to the door of Yunze's office with a leisurely pace. There was a charity dinner at the Imperial Hotel today, and Luo Juanji and Yunze were both invited. As the work at the hospital ended early, he came early and waited for Yunze to go together. Luo Juanji wore a white slim-fit suit, which perfectly outlined his slender figure. He rested one hand on the secretary's desk at the door, and supported his cheek with the other hand, looking Su Ru up and down unscrupulously. Secretary Su, you are still so beautiful. Su Ru glanced at him and smiled politely. Mr. Luo, you are joking. In terms of looks, I am not as pretty as Secretary Xiao. Luo Juanji smiled secretly. I also know that Xiao Tongyu is pretty, but Xiao Tongyu is not someone I can afford to touch. Suddenly being mentioned by Su Ru, Xiao Tongyu frowned and gently kicked her. Mr. Luo, President G is still busy, it should be ready in a while, do you want to go to the lounge and wait? Do you want tea or coffee? Luo Juanji waved his hand. No need, I'll stand here for a while and chat with Secretary Su. Xiao Tongyu couldn't continue with this. She gave Su Ru a look that told her to wish her the best and continued with the work at hand. Luo Juanji looked at Su Ru with an infatuated look in his eyes. Secretary Su, I heard that you are 25 years old this year. Do you have a boyfriend? Thank you for your concern, Mr. Luo. I have a boyfriend. When are you going to get married? From a medical point of view, 25 to 30 is the best childbearing age. After a woman turns 25, time flies by. Su Ru always hated this kind of dandy young man, and Luo Juanji simply embodied all the things she hated. Whenever he opened his mouth, she felt uncomfortable all over. Su Ru's tone became worse and worse. She looked at Luo Juanji with disgust. Mr. Luo, I don't want to have children. At this time, Yunze's internal phone call came. Secretary Xiao, come in for a moment. Xiao Tongyu didn't want to avoid Yunze, she just wanted to help Su Ru get rid of Luo Juanji, this dog skin plaster. So she winked at Su Ru. Su Ru immediately understood what she meant and nodded quickly. Then Xiao Tongyu said to the phone, Boss G, I just happen to have something on hand. Can Secretary Su go in and help you? No, I want you to come in. After saying that, Yunze hung up the phone. Luo Juanji on the side almost laughed out loud. With Xiao Tongyu here, why would Yunze want another woman to come in? Xiao Tongyu stood up helplessly and walked into the office. Yunze was wearing the ironed white shirt that had just been delivered from the boutique and was standing in front of the window with his back to the door. He has a tall and straight figure, broad shoulders with smooth lines, and his shirt is tucked into his suit pants, fitting perfectly at the waistline. Just this back view is enough to make many women fall in love with him. But Xiao Tongyu is an exception. Because she had seen the beastly appearance beneath this handsome appearance. The 4 words, beast in human clothing, were tailor-made for Yunze. Hearing Xiao Tongyu coming in, Yunze turned his head. He pointed to the suit hanging on the hanger beside him and said, help me put it on. Xiao Tongyu was speechless. Did Yunze have Parkinson's disease or a stroke? He couldn't even dress himself. Seeing that she stood up straight and didn't move, Yunze raised his eyebrows and asked, why? Secretary Xiao doesn't want to. No, I was stunned by how handsome Mr. G was. Xiao Tongyu smiled slightly, took the black suit from the hanger, and helped Yunze put it on. Yunze's eyes were grim. This woman, she is talking nonsense again. When would she finally tell him the truth? Xiao Tongyu helped Yunze adjust the collar of his suit. Her fair and slender fingers gently pressed their high-quality flannel fabric. Even through his clothes, Yunze could feel his heartbeat quickening and the blood in his body began to slowly boil. He looked down at Xiao Tongyu's face. At such a close distance, he couldn't see any pores on her tender face, but the fine hairs on her skin were clearly visible. After a while, Xiao Tongyu raised her head and smiled sweetly at Yunze. Okay, President G. At this moment, Yunze couldn't control himself. He put his arms around Xiao Tongyu's waist and pressed her body tightly against his chest. After a moment of panic, Xiao Tongyu raised the corner of his mouth. What's wrong, President Ji? Secretary Xiao, when can you tell me the truth? Xiao Tongyu's constant disguise made Ji Yunze uncomfortable. He missed the way she looked panicked every time she accidentally showed her face, and he knew that was the real her. Xiao Tongyu tilted his head. What truth does President Ji want to hear? Ji Yunze's hand slowly reached into her clothes. Are you afraid of me? Xiao Tongyu found it funny. Which woman wouldn't be afraid of Ji Yunze's face, which is as cold as if it had just been taken out of the refrigerator? She nodded, afraid. Ji Yunze stretched out a hand and gently stroked her little face. But what should I do, Secretary Xiao? I seem to like you. Ji Yunze's evil eyes and his expression that did not allow for rebuttal made Xiao Tongyu speechless instantly. To her, the sentence, I seem to like you, is no different from, I want to eat you. Seeing the panic on Xiao Tongyu's face, Ji Yunze smiled with satisfaction. Then he ordered, come with me to the dinner party tonight. Why? Xiao Tongyu looked up in surprise. Why, Secretary Xiao doesn't want to go. If President Ji needs a female companion, there are definitely many more suitable candidates than me. If Mr. Ji needs it, I will help him contact it right away. As Xiao Tongyu spoke, she put her hands on Ji Yunze's arm and pushed gently, meaning, can you take your hands out of my clothes? Ji Yunze's face was so dark that ink was about to drip out. When have you ever seen me bring a female companion? Xiao Tongyu was so angry that she almost laughed. You never bring a female companion, so why did you bring me? Am I not even a woman in your eyes? She was thinking about how to answer, when suddenly, snap. Ji Yunze unbuttoned Xiao Tongyu's bra, and the bra slid down her shoulders. It's okay if Secretary Xiao doesn't want to go. Just let me keep this for today. After Ji Yunze finished speaking, he grabbed her underwear and began to slowly pull it down. This series of operations left Xiao Tongyu stunned. Who said that Ji Yunze was an abstinent man who didn't like women? He was so familiar with the place, he was simply a habitual hooligan. She quickly covered her chest and pulled it in the opposite direction. Mr. Ji, please respect yourself. Ji Yunze smirked. What is self-respect? After a struggle, Xiao Tongyu admitted defeat. She knew that she could never defeat the bastard in front of her. No, a man who is worse than a dog. Okay, I'll go. Mr. Ji, let go. Hearing her say this, Ji Yunze let go with satisfaction. Xiao Tongyu quickly reached out to fasten the clasp of her bra, but perhaps because she was too flustered and her hands were shaking, she couldn't fasten it no matter what she did. I'll help you. Ji Yunze held Xiao Tongyu's hands, which were clasped behind her back, and gently put the underwear on her body intactly. However, he didn't seem to have any intention of letting go. He looked at Xiao Tongyu with a wicked smile, and met her moist eyes, like a panicked little rabbit. The next second, Ji Yunze lowered his head and kissed Xiao Tongyu's lips deeply. His kiss was domineering and passionate. Xiao Tongyu only felt that his brain was deprived of oxygen because of the kiss. Just when she was about to suffocate, Ji Yunze let her go. Get off work at 6 o'clock sharp, let's go together. After Ji Yunze finished speaking, he threw a gift box to Xiao Tongyu. Change into this. Xiao Tongyu took the gift box and nodded with a red face. Thank you, President Ji, I'll go out first. She wiped the saliva from the corner of her mouth, tidied her hair and clothes, and walked out of the office quickly with the gift box. Every day, during work and after get off work, Feifei was right, she would die at the hands of Ji Yunze sooner or later. Chapter 12, Seeing Lin Xiao Again. Banquet hall on the second floor of the Imperial Capital Hotel. The walls are hung with gorgeous silks, dotted with exquisite gold thread decorations, like a dazzling painting. The luxurious crystal chandelier hangs high on the ceiling, and the bright light shines through the crystal, just like the twinkling stars in the night sky. The carvings on the ceiling are meticulously crafted, and the huge floor-to-ceiling windows overlook the night view of the city. The entire banquet hall was filled with a luxurious and romantic atmosphere, which made Xiao Tongyu feel a little dazzled. She stood beside Ji Yunze, smiling and nodding to everyone who came to greet her. The corners of his mouth, which had been raised all the time, were about to twitch. Mr. Ji, who is this? After greeting Ji Yunze, the man in front of him looked Xiao Tongyu up and down curiously. Hello, Mr. Li. I am Mr. Ji's secretary. My last name is Xiao. It's Mr. Ji's secretary Xiao. Mr. Li handed over the champagne. Would you like a drink? Xiao Tongyu hesitated for a moment, and suddenly heard Ji Yunze's cold voice, "She doesn't drink. Let's go." He uttered the word quietly, motioning her to follow. Xiao Tongyu bowed to Mr. Li embarrassedly to apologize and followed Ji Yunze's footsteps. Luo Juanji watched all this with great interest. Ji Yunze, who never brought a female companion to various occasions, brought a woman for the first time, which caused quite a stir. But this woman looked pure and lustful, and had a unique temperament different from ordinary beauties, which made her even more attractive. Luo Juanji whispered to Xiao Tongyu, "How is it, Secretary Xiao, are you used to it?" Xiao Tongyu forced a smile, "Thank you for your concern, Mr. Luo. I can still handle it for now." In fact, she was already beginning to feel dizzy. He hadn't slept well for several days, was busy at work during the day, and was under too much mental pressure after being targeted by Ji Yunze. His body was still aching, and Xiao Tongyu felt as if he was in turmoil. On the other side of the banquet hall, Lin Xiao, who was silently holding a champagne glass, noticed Xiao Tongyu. The Lin Group was also invited to today's dinner. However, the recent financial crisis of the Lin Group has become known to everyone, causing all major companies to avoid them, fearing that they would also be in trouble. Lin Xiao stared at Xiao Tongyu intently. She was wearing a pearly white strapless mini dress, the hem of which was about halfway to her thighs, revealing a pair of white, slender arms and sexy collarbones. Her breasts and slender waist were so attractive that people could not help but feel excited. Lin Xiao felt a surge of regret in his heart. Xiao Tongyu, when did she become so beautiful? What had blinded him in the past, that he turned a blind eye to the cute girl who had been chasing after him, and even hated her so much? Is it because he hates the feeling of being bound by a childhood marriage? Lin Xiao wanted to talk to her, but Xiao Tongyu was with Ji Yunze, so he didn't dare to go forward rashly. At this time, Xiao Tongyu felt that she could hardly stand, and her heels were aching from the rubbing of her high heels. She whispered to Ji Yunze, "I'm sorry, Mr. Ji, I'm going to the bathroom." Ji Yunze nodded calmly, and she hurried to the bathroom. After pushing the door open, Xiao Tongyu quickly took off her high heels and found that her heels were rubbed and bleeding. Xiao Tongyu is quite tall, and she usually doesn't wear high heels except when she's at work. But she doesn't stand for so long in high heels at work, and now she has pain in her heels, lower body, and headache, and feels pain all over her body. I don't know if Ji Yunze deliberately gave her this tube-top dress. The red marks on her chest were particularly conspicuous on her fair skin. She could only use liquid foundation to cover it up for a long time before it was basically invisible. Xiao Tongyu looked at herself in the mirror. She felt very tired and wanted to go back and take a nap. The experiences of these years have made her an extremely optimistic person, otherwise she would have died long ago. Well, just hold on a little longer and she can go home and sleep. Thinking of this, she applied some more foundation on the red marks, put on her high heels with great pain, pushed the door open and walked out. As soon as she stepped out of the women's restroom, her wrist was suddenly grabbed by someone. Xiao Tongyu looked up in horror and met Lin Xiao's scarlet eyes. "Lin Xiao. What are you doing? Let go. Tong Tong, let's talk." Lin Xiao held her wrist tightly without letting go. Xiao Tongyu stared at him coldly, "We have nothing to talk about." "Tong Tong, haven't you always liked me? How can you just let it go?" Xiao Tongyu found it both funny and pathetic. It turned out that he had been so humble when he desperately chased after Lin Xiao. No wonder he dislikes her. "Lin Xiao, wake up. You don't like me. You just hope that I can help your Lin family. But it's all in the past. I have already repaid your Lin family for raising me. I have no obligation to help you anymore." Lin Xiao grabbed her wrist and squeezed it tighter and tighter, as if he wanted to rub it into his palm. "Tong Tong, you don't have to help us. I have a way to make the company better. As long as you are with me, I like you." "Lin Xiao, have you forgotten how you treated me back then? You said I was ugly and rustic, and you wanted to vomit when you saw me. Where were you when Qin Mengyang brought a group of girls to beat me, grabbed my hair, and threw my school bag? When I was sick and cried and asked you if you could help me buy medicine, what did you say? You said I was dead, so be it." Lin Xiao's eyes became moist because of these words, and his voice began to choke. "I'm sorry, Tong Tong, it's all my fault, please give me another chance, I really like you." Xiao Tongyu pulled her wrist towards him with all her strength. "But I don't like you. Let go." During the tug of war, Xiao Tongyu's long black hair draped over her chest was thrown aside, revealing two conspicuous red marks behind her ears. Lin Xiao paused for a moment. He stared at Xiao Tongyu's neck and couldn't move his eyes away. He almost choked up as he asked, "Tong Tong, do you have a man?" Xiao Tongyu was startled and quickly put her hair back to her chest. Damn, when I was using foundation to cover it up, I didn't notice such a tricky place behind my ear. Is Yunze born in the year of the dog? Why does he chew on whatever he gets? Lin Xiao, this is none of your business, let me go. Lin Xiao let out an angry roar. Xiao Tongyu, you like me? How can you look for a messy man? Lin Xiao, no one will always like you. When you don't treat me as a human being, I let you go. Xiao Tongyu felt his wrist begin to ache. Let me go. Just then, a familiar and cold voice sounded from the side. Secretary Xiao. Chapter 13, Say You Will Never Like Lin Xiao. Xiao Tongyu and Lin Xiao turned their heads at the same time and saw Yunze standing on the side. Their high-end black suit and the dark eyes made him look particularly oppressive. Seeing Yunze, the most terrifying man in the imperial capital, Lin Xiao couldn't help but let go of Xiao Tongyu's hand. Yunze glanced at Lin Xiao with disdain and asked with a smirk, "Who is this?" Lin Xiao opened his mouth, but no words came out. Wu Yang on the side continued, "Boss Ji, this is the son of the Lin group, Lin Xiao." Yunze had a smile on his face, but his tone was full of threats and oppression, piercing people's hearts like a sword, making people shudder. "Excuse me, Mr. Lin, what can I do for my secretary?" Lin Xiao finally recovered from his shock. He nodded and said, "Boss Ji, Secretary Xiao and I are old acquaintances. We haven't seen each other for a long time. We chatted for a while." Yunze narrowed his eyes. Chat for a while. He clearly saw Lin Xiao tightly grasping Xiao Tongyu's wrist. If there was a knife in his eyes, Lin Xiao would have been chopped to death by Yunze by now. He ignored Lin Xiao and ordered Xiao Tongyu, "Secretary Xiao, go." Xiao Tongyu rubbed his wrist and quickly followed. Yunze did not return to the banquet hall, but took Xiao Tongyu to the presidential suite on the top floor. Xiao Tongyu suddenly felt dizzy. "Boss Ji, now that the dinner is over, I'll leave first." "Stop." Xiao Tongyu turned around and stood uncomfortably beside the sofa in the living room of the suite. Yunze, he won't want it again, will he? He just let her go back and rest for a day, and she really can't live like this. Yunze leaned against the sofa, his legs naturally crossed. He lit a cigarette, the scarlet cigarette, but looked particularly eye-catching between his white and slender fingers. He blew out a puff of smoke and looked up at Xiao Tongyu. "I'm going to kill Lin." Xiao Tongyu trembled all over, and his heel, which was already aching, almost made him lose his balance. "Why, Mr. Ji?" "Because their son pulled my secretary. In fact, there is more than just this reason." Yunze had already arrived at the corridor, and he heard every word of the conversation between Xiao Tongyu and Lin Xiao. Lin Xiao said that Xiao Tongyu used to like him. How dare she like another man? Is she tired of living? Hearing Yunze say this, Xiao Tongyu became a little anxious. No matter how badly the Lin family treated her, she was raised by them. One should not be ungrateful. "Boss Ji, there was a misunderstanding between Lin Xiao and me, but it's all in the past. Boss Ji, please don't mind it. He and I won't have any more interactions in the future." Yunze stared at the woman in front of him. Her eyes were wet, her long eyelashes fluttered up and down, and her rosy little mouth was slightly open, which made his heart beat fast. Yunze put out the cigarette in his hand. "You beg me." Xiao Tongyu's lips moved slightly, making a silent hoarse sound, and his whole body couldn't stop shaking. She knew that Yunze was threatening her again. "Did your mother teach you how to ask for help?" "Mr. Ji, my parents died very early, and they didn't have the chance to teach me." Xiao Tongyu's voice trembled slightly, like a thin thread swaying in the wind. Yunze frowned, and a trace of pity suddenly surged in his heart. "If Mr. Ji wants me to ask for help, you can tell me." Xiao Tongyu clenched her hands into fists, her nails digging deep into her flesh. She almost forced herself not to let her tears flow out. If she had someone to rely on in this world and her parents loved her, how could she have ended up in this situation? Yunze opened his lips slightly. "Go take a shower." "Okay, Mr. Ji." After Xiao Tongyu entered the bathroom, Yunze called Wu Yang. "Check Xiao Tongyu's background." "Yes, President Ji." "Also, buy a set of women's pajamas, underwear, and a set of comfortable casual clothes and send them to the presidential suite. Yes, Mr. G, do you have any other requests? It will be delivered within half an hour. Okay, Mr. G. In the bathroom. Xiao Tongyu turned on the shower and let the hot water pour over his body. Suddenly, the door opened. Ji Yunze walked in. Xiao Tongyu almost screamed, but met Ji Yunze's extremely evil eyes. Secretary Xiao, let me teach you how to ask for help. Xiao Tongyu was so scared that he retreated to the corner of the shower room. Boss Ji, can we change places? Cannot. Not long after, Xiao Tongyu's whole body was so sore that she couldn't stand up anymore, and Ji Yunze carried her horizontally to the bed. I don't know when, a set of women's pajamas and underwear had been placed on the bed. Xiao Tongyu was in so much pain that she couldn't move. She reached out to grab her pajamas, but found Ji Yunze lying down and applying ointment on her. To be honest, Xiao Tongyu would rather be slept with by him a few times than let him apply ointment on her, which was so shameful. She couldn't help but close her eyes. After applying the ointment, Ji Yunze unfolded the pajamas that Wu Yang had just quietly put in and looked at it carefully. Was this silent and sultry man observing Xiao Tongyu all along? How come he even bought the perfect size of underwear? Xiao Tongyu struggled to sit up, but because he was in so much pain all over, he fell back on the bed. Seeing her cute and pitiful appearance, Ji Yunze smiled dotingly. So, for the first time in his life, he began to help a woman put on her clothes. If Han Yu and Luo Juanji knew this, they would laugh at him for the rest of his life. Xiao Tongyu was so scared that he almost rolled off the bed. Boss Ji. I can do it myself. Ji Yunze growled impatiently, don't move. His bony fingers helped Xiao Tongyu button up her clothes one by one, and his body reacted uncontrollably. Damn, in front of this woman, his desire is like a volcano erupting and he can't stop it. Xiao Tongyu deliberately turned her head away. She felt like she had just been to the gates of hell in the bathroom, and had finally come out alive, and she didn't want to die again. After helping Xiao Tongyu put on his clothes, Ji Yunze pointed to another set of casual clothes at the head of the bed. Secretary Xiao, you will be allowed to take a day off tomorrow. The dress is not convenient, so you can go home in that. Xiao Tongyu was stunned. Suddenly, for no reason, she felt a hint of consideration from Ji Yunze. Was it her illusion? Ji Yunze was actually considering the feelings of the object of his sexual desire? Thank you, President Ji. Xiao Tongyu turned sideways and raised her pink little face towards Ji Yunze, her big deer-like eyes sparkling. Ji Yunze grabbed her face with one hand. Secretary Xiao, say you will never like Lin Xiao. Speak. His face was full of anger. I will never like Lin Xiao. Ji Yunze smiled. He lowered his head and kissed Xiao Tongyu's lips. Go to sleep, before I regret it. Chapter 14. When will it end? In the middle of the night, Ji Yunze was sitting on the bed processing documents on his laptop, while Xiao Tongyu, who was lying beside him, was breathing evenly. She was so tired that she didn't even care whether she had to wait until the president fell asleep before she could go to sleep. Ji Yunze turned his head to stare at the woman beside him. Her cheeks were rosy, and her face was resting on the pillow. Her long eyelashes were resting on her eyelids, and her lips were slightly open and pouting, which made her look inexplicably cute. Ji Yunze was so fascinated by what she saw that he couldn't help but reach out to help her tidy up the strand of hair that covered her eyes. Perhaps because he made her feel a little itchy, Xiao Tongyu frowned, put her hand on the inside of Ji Yunze's thigh, and grabbed his bathrobe. Secretary Xiao, let go. Xiao Tongyu was sleeping soundly, not moving at all. Ji Yunze frowned, bent down and kissed her lips. He sucked wantonly and then left. Xiao Tongyu licked her lips with her tongue, moaned softly, her brows relaxed, and she began to breathe lightly again. How could this woman be so seductive? Ji Yunze recalled the words Xiao Tongyu said to Lin Xiao in despair in the corridor. You said I was ugly and rustic, and you wanted to vomit when you saw me. Where were you when Qin Mengyang brought a group of girls to beat me, grabbed my hair, and threw my school bag? When I was sick and cried and asked you if you could help me buy medicine, what did you say? You said I was dead, so be it. Xiao Tongyu, what on earth did she go through? The next morning, Xiao Tongyu woke up and looked at his phone. It was 10 o'clock. She jumped up with fright. Then she thought again that Ji Yunze seemed to have agreed to let her take a day off yesterday, so she felt relieved. Ji Yunze had already left, and she was the only one left in the huge suite. She immediately felt extremely relaxed physically and mentally. She went into the bathroom, took a shower, and changed into her newly bought casual clothes. The loose hooded sweatshirt and tight jeans, coupled with her unpainted face, made her look like a freshman college student. Just as she was about to go out, she received a call from Suru. "Tong Tong, please come and save me. Mr. G has already broken the 9th coffee cup." "What's wrong?" He said the coffee temperature was wrong. Suru's voice was filled with tears. Xiao Tongyu was puzzled. 60 degrees hot Americano, geisha coffee beans, how can it be wrong? The temperature is shown on the coffee machine. "Yeah, I don't know what's wrong, but Mr. G said it's wrong." In fact, Suru knew it clearly in her mind. It was not the coffee temperature that was wrong, but the person who made the coffee was wrong. She saw clearly the look in President G's eyes when he looked at Xiao Tongyu. Since becoming Ji Yunze's personal secretary, Xiao Tongyu has not taken a single day off in the past year. Today was Xiao Tongyu's first day off, and Ji Yunze was like a beast with its fur standing on end. In less than 2 hours at work, he smashed 9 coffee cups, broke a phone and a laptop, and kicked a chair. He also scolded everyone in and out of the office, including Wu Yang. If he continues like this, the entire CEO executive floor will be demolished by him today. Xiao Tongyu bit her lip. She knew that Suru wanted her to go to work today. But she finally got a day off, which seemed like a gift from Ji Yunze to her. It would be too hard for her to give it up. "I'm sorry, Ruru. I'm not feeling well today. I just can't come over. Just bear with it. At worst, you can stop sending coffee to Mr. G. You said I'll make him 10 cups tomorrow morning." Xiao Tongyu was not talking nonsense, she was indeed not feeling well. She hadn't eaten since yesterday afternoon, and Ji Yunze had tormented her in the evening, so she felt uncomfortable in her stomach. Hearing Xiao Tongyu say that she was not feeling well, Suru quickly said, "It's okay, Tong Tong, you should have a good rest. Mr. G has me and assistant Wu here. It's okay if he scolds you a few times. You won't die." "Thank you, Ruru." After hanging up the phone, Xiao Tongyu planned to go eat something first and then go to Lawyer Wang. Xiao Tongyu bought some fruits and nutritional supplements and knocked on the door of Lawyer Wang's office. "Uncle Wang." Wang Kejin raised his eyes and saw Xiao Tongyu. He took off his glasses, revealing a bright smile, and the wrinkles at the corners of his eyes deepened a lot. Wang Kejin had worked for Xiao Tongyu's father Xiao Ming's Xiao Group a long time ago. After Xiao Ming and his wife Li Xiaoyu got into trouble, the company was sold and he opened his own law firm. 13 years have passed in the blink of an eye. "Tong Tong, why are you here?" Wang Kejin knew that in the past year Xiao Tongyu had started to work as the secretary to the president of the G Group, the #1 company in the imperial capital. He had been so busy that she could not find the end of the business. She used to come to see him every month, but now she hadn't seen him for a long time. "I happened to have a day off today, so I came here specially to see Uncle Wang." Xiao Tongyu put down the things he bought and sat down opposite Wang Kejin's desk. Wang Kejin looked at Xiao Ming's beautiful daughter. This little girl had a hard life since she was a child, and he really felt sorry for her. "Tong Tong, have you eaten yet? I happen to have something on hand right now. Can I ask my secretary to order some food for you?" Xiao Tongyu waved his hand. "I've eaten, Uncle Wang, I just came to see you, I'll sit for a while and then leave." Wang Kejin put down the pen in his hand and leaned forward. "By the way, Tong Tong, I have been investigating the car accident involving your parents and the damaged brakes. I go to the police station every now and then to ask about it. But you know, the police station has new cases all the time, and no one puts pressure on them. We are insignificant and our influence is not so great." Xiao Tongyu nodded and smiled sweetly. "I understand, Uncle Wang, thank you for thinking about my parents all these years. I didn't come here to ask this specifically today, I just haven't seen you for a long time, and I miss you and Aunt Shu a little bit." Wang Kejin and his wife Shuzhen have always liked Xiao Tongyu. They have a daughter who has long been married abroad. If Xiao Ming had not entrusted her to the Lin family, they would have even wanted to adopt her as an adopted daughter. He knew that the Lin family was not good to her. If Xiao Tongyu became their daughter, she would probably be much happier than she is now. Thinking of this, Wang Kejin asked with concern, "Tong Tong, you are also 24 years old, do you have a boyfriend?" Xiao Tongyu blushed. "Uncle Wang, I'm so busy, how can I have time to find a boyfriend?" "Okay, Uncle Wang, I won't ask any more questions. Just tell me before you come next time. Come to our house and I'll ask your Aunt Shu to cook some of your favorite dishes. Okay, Uncle Wang. The two chatted for a few more words, and Xiao Tongyu walked out of Wang Kejin's office. It was afternoon, and the autumn afternoon sun shone on her porcelain white face, warm and soft, bringing her long-lost gentleness and comfort. Xiao Tongyu sighed softly. Boyfriend? She also wanted to find a man she could rely on. But now she has become Ji Yunze's plaything. Which man would dare to want her? Does she really have to wait until Ji Yunze gets tired of her and dumps her before she can be free? When will days like this end? Chapter 15. Who let Qin Mengyang bully my best friend? Backstage of Didu TV station. Qin Mengyang was sitting in the VIP lounge waiting for the recording of a variety show. Assistant Xiaoshan was helping her with her hair. Ouch! Qin Mengyang's eyes widened, her voice full of anger. What the hell are you doing? Do you have eyes? You pulled my hair. Is your mother disabled? How could she give birth to a moron like you? Xiaoshan bit her lip and dared not speak. After working with Qin Mengyang for so long, she had become accustomed to it, but being scolded like this every day was unbearable for anyone. Manager Zhao Xilan reminded her quietly, Mengyang, keep your voice down. There are so many people at the TV station. We finally managed to remove you from Ji's hot search. Do you still want to be on another hot search? Qin Mengyang rolled her eyes. Thinking of this trending search, she was furious. Xiao Tongyu is such a cheap woman, why did she let Ji Yunze buy a hot search for her? Ji even retrieved the surveillance video and clearly captured her face when she beat someone, causing her to be scolded again on the internet. In recent years, Qin Mengyang has had a bad reputation in the entertainment industry because she is arrogant and willful and does not take her staff seriously, thus offending many people. At the same time, because of the rising stars in the entertainment industry like Zhuang Shufei who have both good connections, beautiful acting skills, and friendliness, Qin Mengyang now has fewer and fewer advertising endorsements, and almost no one wants her to film anymore. But it doesn't matter if you think about it. As long as she is with Ji Yunze, what else does she need to film? They, the Qin family, can also rest easy. But this Ji Yunze, whom she had been pursuing for 3 years, was simply out of reach. After finally getting in touch with old man Ji and using his name to find him, Ji Yunze asked the security guards to kick her out. With Qin Mengyang's beauty, she doesn't believe that she can't get this man at the top of the altar. On the other side, Zhuang Shufei followed her agent Wen Xinrong into the rest area and heard constant cursing coming from a VIP lounge. Sister Wang, who's in there? So fierce. Do you think your assistant is a human being? Wen Xinrong frowned. Who else could it be? Qin Mengyang, who working in the entertainment industry hasn't been scolded by her. Chen Chen, an assistant at the side, also spoke up. Sister Xu Fei, this Qin Mengyang is so abominable. People in our assistant group scold her every day. One time, she asked someone to pour water for her, but the water was too hot, so she poured it directly on the person's head. Zhuang Shufei's greatest characteristic is that she would help others when she saw injustice. That's how she saved Xiao Tongyu from the dire straits. After hearing what Wen Xinrong and Chen Chen said, she remembered that her best friend had just been slapped in the face 2 days ago, and she was immediately furious. Zhuang Shufei frowned and said, Sister Wang, was this lounge arranged by the TV station or did you choose it yourself? I chose it myself. Logically, you are the chief female guest, so this lounge should be yours today. But Qin Mengyang is such a person, she will definitely choose the biggest and best one. Zhuang Shufei was not a petty person, but since Qin Mengyang had run into her trap, there was no need for her to be humble. Hey, Sister Wang, today this lounge belongs to me, Zhuang Shufei. After saying that, she pushed the door and walked in. Seeing Zhuang Shufei coming in with her agent and assistant, Qin Mengyang's agent Zhao Xilan quickly stood up and greeted them. Ms. Zhuang. Zhuang Shufei is a popular young actress recently and the eldest daughter of the Zhuang group. Even if Zhao Xilan had 100 guts, he would not dare to offend her. Qin Mengyang looked at Zhuang Shufei with suspicion. The two of them had never been friends, so why did she come here specially? Zhuang Shufei said to the assistant, Chen Chen, this sofa is nice, let's sit here and wait. Okay, Sister Shufei. Qin Mengyang was so angry that she shouted, Hey, what do you mean? Can't you see that there are already people here? Zhuang Shufei crossed her arms and looked around. There are 2 people standing, but I didn't see anyone sitting. You? After hearing what Zhuang Shufei said, Qin Mingyan's assistant Xiaoshen couldn't help but applaud in his heart. Then, Zhuang Shufei said to Chen Chen, give the agent and the assistant a cup of coffee. After all, everyone has a share here. As for those who are not human, I can't control them. Chen took the coffee from the paper bag and handed it to Zhao Xilan and Xiaoshen. Our sister Xu Fei treats you to coffee. No thanks. Xiaoshen waved his hand to refuse. Take it, it's okay. Qin Mengyang couldn't bear it any longer. She slammed the table and stood up. Zhuang Shufei. Do you still have any shame? Do you think you are so great because you are famous? Are you looking down on others? Her eyes were wide open and her face turned red and white at Zhuang Shufei's anger. Zhuang Shufei said calmly, oh, something has stood up. It wants to be a human being. Do you want some coffee? You bitch. Qin Mengyang shouted and swung her hand to slap Zhuang Shufei, but was grabbed by Zhuang Shufei. Qin Mengyang, is this all you have to fight? Why are you showing off in front of me? She shook off Qin Mengyang's hand in disgust. When I was playing Sudeji, you were still playing Little Red Riding Hood. Qin Mengyang was speechless after being retorted by Zhuang Shufei. She stared at her, with two flames of anger dancing in her eyes, burning fiercely. Zhuang Shufei, you have guts. Just wait for me. Oh? Until when? Until you become the young mistress of the Ji family. Zhuang Shufei squinted at her. You think too much. Can Ji Yunze like you? Don't you look in the mirror. Qin Mengyang suddenly understood. Zhuang Shufei suddenly came to pick a fight because she also had a crush on Ji Yunze? Was she here to declare war? Seeing the look on Qin Mengyang's face, Zhuang Shufei reminded her, by the way, don't make a mistake. I don't like Ji Yunze. Men like him are not worthy of my eyes. Thinking of how Xiao Tongyu had to see a doctor because of being bullied by him, Zhuang Shufei wished she could castrate this bastard. Qin Mengyang was so angry that she was furious. She didn't know how she had offended Zhuang Shufei. Zhuang Shufei is younger, prettier and more popular than her, and Zhuang's is more competitive than Qin's. Qin Mengyang simply cannot surpass Zhuang Shufei in any way. Seeing that Qin Mengyang didn't say anything, Zhuang Shufei continued to say disdainfully, I'm sorry, I'm the chief female guest of today's variety show, and this is my lounge. If you don't want the director to cut your shots, the door is over there. Goodbye. Seeing this, Zhao Xilan quickly said in a flattering tone, I'm sorry, Miss Zhuang, we made a mistake. Let's change the lounge right now. Qin Mengyang stood there like a piece of wood, refusing to move, and was dragged away by Zhao Xilan and Xiaoshen. After they left, Chen couldn't help but praise Zhuang Shufei highly. Sister Shufei. You are so awesome. I saw you were so easygoing usually, but I didn't expect you to scold people without blinking. Look at Qin Mengyang's expression, it was so cool. I should have taken a picture of it. Wang Xinrong cast a blaming look at Zhuang Shufei, this is just the first time. It won't happen again. Zhuang Shufei smiled and said, I see, Sister Wang, who asked Qin Mengyang to bully my best friend. Chapter 16 Approaching his purpose. Office of the President of Ji Group. Ji Yunze had to acknowledge Wu Yang's efficiency. The task assigned to him last night was completed today. He looked at the stack of investigation reports about Xiao Tongyu on the table with a frown. It turns out that this is what Xiao Tongyu's past was like. He picked up her college graduation photo. In the photo, Xiao Tongyu was wearing a bachelor's gown, with long hair, a pair of big, moist eyes like a deer under her bangs, porcelain white skin, and red lips. She was not wearing any makeup, but she was so beautiful that she looked like she was wearing makeup. He is the outstanding student of the Department of Architecture of Imperial Capital University every year, the winner of the first-class scholarship, and the outstanding graduate of the entire Imperial Capital in the year of graduation. So, when Xiao Tongyu said that she wanted to open a design studio, she was not just saying it to whet his appetite. After her parents died unexpectedly, they sold the company and left her a large sum of money. So she said she was not short of money and she did not transfer the 2 million back to him on purpose. The year she graduated, she received an invitation from the top-ranked architectural firm in the capital, and also received an admission notice from the Royal College of Architects in London, but she did not go for either of them. In the end, she turned around and joined Ji's company and became an ordinary administrator. The life that originally had no intersection with Ji Yunze was forcibly connected by her. After her success, she seemed to be avoiding him everywhere. After working in the business world for so long and always being cautious and careful, Yunze had to admit that this woman's background seemed very clean, so clean that it didn't seem like she was deliberately approaching him under someone's instructions. But what is going on in her mind? In the evening, Xiao Tongyu went to a supermarket near his home to buy some meat and vegetables, preparing to go home and cook noodles. When she returned downstairs to their community, she was startled by the sight of a familiar car. It's Yunze's Rolls-Royce. She was clearly on vacation today, so why was Yunze coming to her house? Seeing Xiao Tongyu coming over, Wu Yang opened the driver's door and got out of the car. Secretary Xiao, President Ji is looking for you. Please get in the car. Xiao Tongyu hesitated for a moment. She knew she couldn't escape. But this posture looked like a scene in a European or American movie where someone was about to be kidnapped by gangsters and killed and dismembered. Thinking of this, she handed the dish in her hand to Wu Yang. Assistant Wu, if I don't make it out of the car alive, don't waste this dish. Wu Yang. Xiao Tongyu opened the car door and sat in the back seat. Yunze still looked cold, with a mixed expression on his face. He stared at Xiao Tongyu. She wore a short sweater and loose jeans, and tied her waist-length hair into a high ponytail. She looked pure and sexy, and her slender waist was faintly visible when she raised her hand. This almost cost Yunze his life. Trying hard to suppress the most primitive desire in the man's heart, he grabbed Xiao Tongyu's neck. The powerful big hand tightly grasped her snow-white, slender neck, as if it could break it in one move. Xiao Tongyu felt like she was about to suffocate, and tears were about to flow out of her eyes. She didn't know what she had done wrong again. Tell me, why do you want to get close to me? Yunze said lightly, as if the owner of the voice and the pair of big hands were not the same person. Mr. Ji, I'm sorry. Can you please let go first? Yunze still pinched her neck without letting go. Speak, or you won't live for more than an hour. Then strangle me to death. I don't want to live anymore. Xiao Tongyu closed his eyes. What did you say? No one cares whether I live or die, just strangle me to death, Mr. Ji. When Yunze heard that this woman wanted to die, he didn't know why, but his mind went blank for a moment. The next moment, he let go. Xiao Tongyu felt her oxygen-deprived brain suddenly come alive again. She covered her neck and coughed a few times, tears streaming down her face. She couldn't tell whether they were tears from Yunze's pinching or tears of sadness. She raised her red eyes and said, Boss Ji, I admit that I did have a purpose in approaching you. But now, even I find this purpose ridiculous. If you suspect that I have bad intentions towards you, you can fire me now, or drive me out of the imperial capital, or kill me. It's up to you. My life has been a mess for a long time. Maybe it would be better if I died. Xiao Tongyu had tears in her eyes and her whole body was shaking. Yunze opened his lips faintly. Tell me about it. What? Tell me your purpose. Xiao Tongyu bit her lip, clenched her hands and shook her head. Boss Ji, you won't believe it. Explain. She hesitated for a moment and made up her mind. Since President Ji suddenly came to see me today, he must have investigated me. Mr. Ji must know that I was fostered in the Lin family after my parents passed away. I like Lin Xiao very much. Hearing the word like, Yunze's eyes flashed fiercely, and his face turned green and he said, continue. But he hated me, and his girlfriend Qin Mengyang also took the lead in bullying me at school. I felt like I was living a life worse than death at that time. When I saw Qin Mengyang chasing after you, President Ji, in my senior year, I knew she had a crush on you. I thought, if I could successfully get close to you, then maybe. What can I do? It can make her angry. The air in the car was deathly silent. After finally saying the reason, Xiao Tongyu felt like he was the biggest idiot in the world. Yunze raised his eyes, revealing a look of disgust as if he saw a moron, and uttered four words. You're boring. Xiao Tongyu. Yunze was right, she was really bored, so bored that she gambled her life for an inexplicable person. At this time, Yunze threw a bunch of photos at Xiao Tongyu. She looked down and was so shocked that her eyes almost popped out of their sockets. There were photos of her and Yunze making love in bed, and photos of her sleeping naked. Although he had done it many times, watching it so directly from a third party's perspective really made Xiao Tongyu feel extremely ashamed. She subconsciously turned her head away. Boss Ji. This is not a photo I took. I know. I took the photo. Xiao Tongyu. Don't you want revenge? Give it to Qin Mengyang. Yunze had been deeply suspicious of Xiao Tongyu's purpose in approaching him. Before attacking her each time, he would have people carefully check every corner of the room, and also keep an eye out to see if Xiao Tongyu had any filming equipment with her. When he found out that she had nothing but came to sleep with him foolishly, Yunze suddenly had evil thoughts in his mind. He wanted to record this moment, whether for his own enjoyment or to threaten her. He just didn't intend to let her go. Xiao Tongyu was so scared that he quickly waved his hands. No need, Mr. G, this is not appropriate for you to be on top. Yunze wondered if this woman was a bit stupid. She had decided to take revenge, and when she really achieved her goal, the tools for revenge were all in front of her, but she didn't want them. Are you sure you don't want it? No need, Mr. G, take it back. Xiao Tongyu knew in her heart that she was just a plaything for Yunze, an object of sexual gratification. Even if Qin Mengyang knew, how angry could she be? Her goal was to marry Yunze and become the young lady of the Ji family. As for how many women Yunze slept with outside, she didn't care. So from the beginning to the end, Xiao Tongyu was wrong. She is a complete fool. Yunze took back the photo, then I'll keep it. If Secretary Xiao wants to get away from me one day, come and talk to me. Xiao Tongyu looked at him in shock. Mr. G, what do you mean? Secretary Xiao, to be honest, I like you. Yunze raised her chin with his hand. If you are ready to leave before I get tired of you, I will make these photos public. Xiao Tongyu suddenly felt his eyes go dark and he was struck by lightning. Yunze was indeed a terrifying man. He was able to capture the victim easily with such despicable and vile means. What's the difference between this and a gangster? Before she could think of how to answer, Yunze had already crossed over the armrest of the back seat partition and pressed his whole body on her. The 185 centimeters tall man and Xiao Tongyu squeezed into one seat, making the originally spacious space suddenly become extremely small. Boss G, I'm on vacation today. Yunze curled his lips. Who gave you the holiday? You? Looking at Xiao Tongyu's pink little face, Yunze couldn't help but lower his head and kiss her. It was unknown how long it took before this passionate kiss ended. Yunze whispered softly in Xiao Tongyu's ear, I'll give you a day off today. The deep and magnetic voice made Xiao Tongyu tremble all over. She stared at Yunze's face and couldn't take her eyes off. Feeling her gaze, Yunze said, Why? Secretary Xiao wants it. Xiao Tongyu shook his head like a rattle. No, President G. Can you get up? I'm suffocating. Come to work on time tomorrow. Yunze stood up and Xiao Tongyu quickly opened the car door. Goodbye, President G. As she ran out of the car, Wu Yang shouted from behind, Secretary Xiao, your dish. No, I'll give it to you, Assistant Wu. Wu Yang. Wu Yang got into the car and saw Yunze's smiling face in the rearview mirror. Looking at Xiao Tongyu's running back, Yunze was in a good mood. Having confirmed her purpose of approaching him, Yunze was even less prepared to let her go. It must be tied to your side. Chapter 17 being followed. G Group. All kinds of trivial matters came one after another throughout the whole day, making it difficult to cope. Xiao Tongyu felt that he did not have a chance to breathe for a moment. It was almost time to get off work, and she slumped in her seat, finally having a chance to drink a sip of water. Su Ru, who was standing by, was holding her cell phone, looking at something with a hint of joy on her face. Xiao Tongyu looked at her with a smile. Okay, Ruru, I've been busy all day, and you're slacking off here. Su Ru pouted and said coquettishly, It's almost time to get off work. I'm choosing curtains. Xiao Tongyu whispered in surprise, Ru. Are you getting married? Xiao Tongyu knew that Su Ru and her boyfriend had bought an apartment together and had just recently taken possession of it. Since Su Ru had started decorating the apartment, it must be a good thing. Su Ru nodded shyly, I'll treat you to their wedding wine then. Of course I will come. Xiao Tongyu teased her deliberately, You are getting married, Mr. Luo might cry. Su Ru rolled her eyes at her, That's definitely not as good as your marriage. President Ji cried a lot. Xiao Tongyu quickly covered her mouth, Sure. Don't talk nonsense. I know. Hearing Su Ru say this, Xiao Tongyu's heart was suddenly shrouded in a layer of gloom. Yunze, a man worse than pigs and dogs, forced her to go to bed and secretly took photos of her to threaten her. How can I make him tired of it? I also want to get married, Xiao Tongyu thought. After get off work, Yunze sat in the passenger seat of Hanyu's Lamborghini. Today they had made an appointment to go to Hanyu's private club to play billiards. After getting in the car, Yunze said coldly, "The color is too sexy." When buying a car, Hanyu lost a bet with Luo Juanji, so he had to listen to him and customize a tennis ball-colored Lamborghini. This dazzling lemon green color plus the rumbling roar of the sports car attracted countless eyes every time it drove on the road, which was not in line with Hanyu's low-key personality. "Hanyu, this color suits your recent temperament, it's sexy." Yunze glanced at him and said nothing more. The sports car slowly drove out of the main road in front of Ji's group. Hanyu specially adjusted the driving mode to make the roar sound less loud. At this time, an Auguster motorcycle in front attracted their attention. The all-black body of the bike, the all-black outfit of the rider, and the roar that is louder than that of a Lamborghini, really make him look like a cyclist. Yunze, this motorcycle seems to be following the car in front. Hanyu held the steering wheel and looked forward. Yunze leaned one hand on the car window, pursed his lips, and stared at the motorcycle. When the traffic light turned red, the motorcyclist stopped behind a white Audi without hesitation and took out his mobile phone to take pictures of the car. After the car started, he followed closely, like a dog's skin plaster that could not be shaken off. Yunze opened his lips and said, "Follow me." Hanyu looked at him in surprise. When did Yunze become so nosy? Did he know the rider? Seeing Hanyu's puzzled expression, Yunze said again, "Xiao Tongyu's car, a white Audi." At this time, Xiao Tongyu also discovered that a black motorcycle was following him. She was not afraid. As she drove, she searched in her mind for who was following her. Is it Yunze? No. The person who was following her must not know her current address, but Yunze obviously knew it. Moreover, if he wanted to do such a thing, he would never look for such a high-profile person. This person was just short of announcing to the world that he was following someone. Is it Qin Mengyang? Or the Lin family? Xiao Tongyu frowned and drove her Audi slowly on the road, leaving a long distance between her and the car in front. Just as the traffic light was about to change from yellow to red, she stepped on the accelerator, and the white Audi rushed across the road like a beast, leaving a trace of high-speed driving on the street. Hanyu didn't react immediately and was blocked by the car in front of him, so he had to stop at a red light. However, the motorcycle ran through the red light and sped away following Xiao Tongyu's car. Hanyu sighed in a low voice, "Secretary Xiao is so fierce." A terrifying look of hostility flashed across Yunze's face. "Keep following, I know where she lives." Xiao Tongyu deliberately drove the car to a secluded road. She would not be so stupid as to expose where she lived. Seeing that it was pitch black and there was no one around, Xiao Tongyu turned the steering wheel quickly. The Audi turned instantly with a sharp friction sound from the wheels and stopped in front of the motorcycle. The motorcyclist was caught off guard by this sudden maneuver, and he failed to brake and fell to the ground. Xiao Tongyu opened the car door and got out, folding her arms across her chest as she looked at the man in front of her. "Excuse me, sir, what can I do for you?" The rider stood up, spat on the ground in disgust, took off his helmet, revealing an extremely obscene face. "My beautiful lady, I have been entrusted by someone to love you well." Xiao Tongyu chuckled, "Sir, you may be mistaken. My lowly status is not enough for people to pay you to love me." At this moment, she was not afraid at all, but was wondering who she had offended that required someone to attack her. There was only one person coming, and Xiao Tongyu knew that with his own skills, it should not be a problem to deal with him. At this time, Hanyu's car had already circled the community where Xiao Tongyu lived several times, but there was no trace of Xiao Tongyu at all. "Yunze, let's go look nearby." She wouldn't be stupid enough to lead people to her doorstep. Hanyu curled his lips. "We thought of the same thing." As they were driving, they were attracted by the sight of a man and a woman standing face to face on the side of a quiet road. Hanyu stopped the car and turned off the engine. "Go down and help. Have a look. Take a look." Hanyu stared at Yunze with wide eyes. Xiao Tongyu was at least his secretary and had slept with him several times. This cold-blooded man would not just watch her die and not help her, right? Yunze knew in his heart that with Xiao Tongyu's intelligence, she would not lead a man to a deserted road without being sure, and then get out of the car to confront him openly. She was obviously in the car, so it would be safer to drive directly to the police station. At this time, the man had already approached Xiao Tongyu in a lewd manner. He grabbed Xiao Tongyu's wrist and was about to pull her into his arms. "Such a beautiful woman, let me have a good time today." Xiao Tongyu felt a pain in her wrist when he pulled her, and she frowned. The next second, she did a roundhouse kick and kicked the man in front of her hard in the chest. The man was stunned by the kick and subconsciously let go, covering his chest and taking a few steps back. Sir, no matter who asked you to come, please tell him that I, Xiao Tongyu, always abide by my duties. If I have offended him in any way, please let me go. Being kicked by such a weak-looking woman, the man felt greatly insulted. With his eyes wide open, he rushed towards Xiao Tongyu. Xiao Tongyu wanted to stop there, but seeing that the man was still so stubborn, she punched the man's fleshy face with her left and right fists. Then she kicked out quickly, and the man felt a pain in his legs and his knees went weak. With a thud, he fell to his knees aching. Xiao Tongyu clapped his hands in disdain. You can't beat my master. I have practiced fighting for many years. The man was beaten so badly that his face was bruised and swollen, his nose was bleeding, his whole body was in pain, and he couldn't even stand up. Xiao Tongyu gave him a disgusted look and said, By the way, sir, I didn't call the police because I roughly guessed who called you here, and I wanted to save his face. Please go back and tell him that Xiao Tongyu is not the same Xiao Tongyu as before. After saying that, Xiao Tongyu turned around and got into the car. He stepped on the accelerator and the Audi sped away. Han Yu was stunned by this smooth operation. Yunze curled his lips slightly, and he knew that this woman was not simple. Han Yu turned his head and said, Yunze, if Secretary Xiao beats you in bed, can you still sleep with her? Yunze. Chapter 18. Yunze said that Xiao Tongyu was his. After Xiao Tongyu's white Audi drove away, Yunze and Han Yu got out of the car. The man was still lying on the ground, unable to get up, his whole body in a mess, cursing. If he met such a fierce woman, he would definitely ask his employer for more money. Just as he was about to get up, a pair of leather shoes stepped on his head. He fell down again, feeling a sharp pain in his skull, which was about to burst. TSK, I didn't want to touch you, you made my shoes dirty. Han Yu frowned. The man struggled hard and kicked his legs continuously. Suddenly, a knife stabbed into his flesh and blood gushed out. The man shouted miserably, echoing through the sky. Yunze pulled out his Swiss Army knife. Who asked you to come? The man was shocked. He didn't expect that this fierce woman actually had helpers. After being stabbed like this, his legs would probably be broken. Yunze said coldly, Speak. As soon as he finished speaking, the Swiss Army knife stabbed into the man's thigh again. Master. I'm telling you. It was Lin Qianhao, Mr. Lin. He only said he had sex with this woman. Which General Lin? Yunze held the Swiss Army knife and kept stirring it in the man's legs, causing the man to scream in pain. Yes, it's the president of Lin Corporation. The Lin family was the one that adopted Xiao Tongyu, and the Lin Xiao who held Xiao Tongyu's hand that day was their son. Judging from Xiao Tongyu's tone, the Lin family didn't treat her well. They were so cruel to their adopted daughter, so it seemed that this family was not a good person. Yunze stood up. Tell the Lin family. Yunze said that Xiao Tongyu is his. The man's eyes widened in horror. Yunze. Yunze ignored him and turned to Han Yu and said, Let's go. Han Yu took his foot off the man's head. Don't you want the knife anymore? He asked. Yunze, where are the shoes? Do you want more? Han Yu looked disgusted and said, I'll throw it away in a while. When he got home, Xiao Tongyu felt sore all over. I haven't practiced for a long time, and I feel like I'm rusty. It seems like it's time to practice again. Ever since she was bullied by a group of girls led by Qin Mengyang in high school, Xiao Tongyu knew that no one in the world would help her and she could only rely on herself. So after entering university, she resolutely decided to learn martial arts. Even though she was beaten all over after each training, she still insisted on standing up, because she knew that this skill would come in handy one day. Sure enough, this is what is used. After taking a shower, Xiao Tongyu sat in front of the dressing table and blow-dried her hair. She had already expected that the man today must have been sent by the Lin family. For the money her father left her and to get her to marry into the Lin family, they really did everything they could. Had she been defiled by this man, and was left with nowhere else to go but to seek help from the Lin family and take refuge with them? They really underestimated her. It's not like she hasn't been defiled before. She's already been dirty for a long time. Lin's house. Lin Qianhao's hand holding the phone was trembling slightly, and an angry roar from a man came from the other end of the phone. Give me another million. Otherwise I'll report this to the police station. Otherwise we'll just break up. Lin Qianhao panted heavily and managed to squeeze out a word from between his teeth, okay. Seeing that Lin Qianhao agreed, the voice on the other end of the phone softened. By the way, Mr. Lin, I advise you not to hit on that woman. The man who stabbed me in the leg today said that this woman is Yunze's person. After saying that, he hung up the phone. Lin Qianhao's hand holding the phone stopped in mid-air and he didn't react for a long time. Qianhao, what's wrong? Yuan Qing asked with concern. Lin Qianhao shook his head, it didn't work. Yuan Qing fell into the chair. I told you not to do this again. Xiao Tongyu is not a simple person now. Do you think that if you scare her, she will come back to our family? It's all because of your disappointing son. He has already set his eyes on Xiao Tongyu, and nothing can stop him. But he chose to provoke Qin Mengyang. Is it so easy to marry the young lady of the Qin family? She is so proud and arrogant. At this time, the door of the living room opened and a maid welcomed Lin Xiao in. Yuan Qing quickly shut up. They must not let their son know what they did to Xiao Tongyu. Are you back, son? Have you eaten? She immediately put on a gentle face. I finished eating, Dad, Mom, I'm going back to my room. Lin Qianhao looked at his son's back as he went upstairs, and couldn't help asking Yuan Qing, does Lin Xiao really like Xiao Tongyu? I think so. The way he looks at Xiao Tongyu is also different. This worthless brat can't even get a woman. Yuan Qing suddenly thought of something, and she lowered her voice. Qianhao, what did you say about that year? Lin Qianhao roared, don't mention the past. This roar scared Yuan Qing so much that she quickly shut up. Lin Xiao went upstairs, but did not enter his own room. Instead, he turned and entered the bedroom where Xiao Tongyu lived in the past. He sat on her single bed, and on the bedside was a cute little bear alarm clock that Xiao Tongyu had saved up money to buy at that time. At that time, before going to school every day, Xiao Tongyu would always walk to Lin Xiao's door with her school bag on her back and ask carefully, Brother Lin Xiao, can I go to school with you today? When Lin Xiao was sick with a fever, she stayed up all night to fold a bottle full of paper cranes for him. Brother Lin Xiao, I saw in a book that if you make a wish to the paper cranes, your illness will be cured immediately. Every year on Lin Xiao's birthday, she would shyly take out the gift she had saved up to buy. Brother Lin Xiao, happy birthday to you. I hope we can celebrate our birthdays together again next year. But Lin Xiao never celebrated her birthday. Even no one in the Lin family knew when Xiao Tongyu's birthday was. On the day of her high school graduation, Xiao Tongyu moved out of the Lin family. She just sent a message to everyone in the family to say hello, and no one asked her where she could live since she had just turned 18. Not long after, Lin Xiao broke up with Qin Mengyang, and he changed many girlfriends, but no one could really enter his heart. Until I saw Xiao Tongyu again, who was with Yunze. Lin Xiao didn't know whether he fell in love with Xiao Tongyu because she became beautiful, or because Xiao Tongyu had already entered his heart but he had never realized it. No matter what the conclusion was, Lin Xiao had to admit that he was a complete bastard. Even if he didn't like her, he shouldn't hurt a girl's heart like this. He watched her die when she was bullied, threw the birthday present into the trash when she smiled and gave him a present, or said it would be fine if she died when she was sick. It is reasonable for Xiao Tongyu to treat him like this now. He deserves it. Is there any other way for him to get Xiao Tongyu back? Chapter 19 Yunze's Villa. The next morning, Xiao Tongyu walked into Yunze's office with coffee. Mr. Ji, your coffee. Yunze raised his eyes and saw that Xiao Tongyu's wrists and the back of her hands were slightly red, probably because of being pinched by the man yesterday. He deliberately asked, Secretary Xiao, what's wrong with your hand? Xiao Tongyu was stunned for a moment, then smiled as usual. Thank you for your concern, President Ji. I accidentally touched it when I was doing housework yesterday. Har har, your little mouth is quite hard. Yunze smiled secretly and took a sip of coffee. As expected, Xiao Tongyu still had to make coffee. On the day she was on vacation, Yunze felt that the coffee tasted wrong, the temperature was wrong, the smell was wrong, everything was wrong, and he was furious. Boss Ji, if there's nothing else, I'll leave first. Just as Xiao Tongyu was about to turn around, Yunze grabbed her hand. She pulled her hand back gently, but Yunze pulled tighter and tighter. Helpless, she could only smile and ask, Boss Ji, do you have any instructions? Isn't she very strong? Why can't she pull her hands out with just this little strength? Thinking of this, Yunze stood up, reached out and hugged Xiao Tongyu into his arms, her soft breasts and slender waist pressed tightly against his body. Xiao Tongyu frowned. This Yunze is like a male dog in heat. He can go mad at any time and anywhere and urinate everywhere. Yunze lowered his head and buried it in Xiao Tongyu's neck. The remaining scent of shampoo in her hair made him a little addicted. Secretary Xiao, come to my place tonight. Xiao Tongyu was startled. Mr. Ji means. Go to my villa. Yunze gently stroked Xiao Tongyu's hair. Her hair was thin and soft, as smooth as silk thread. Xiao Tongyu's eyes widened in surprise. Yunze actually asked her to go to his house. Yunze's villa has always been lived in by him alone, and probably only Wu Yang has been in. Xiao Tongyu only met him at the door a few times and never stepped through the big iron gate. Mr. Ji always told me to stay overnight at your villa. Right. Yunze put his nose against Xiao Tongyu's fair and soft skin. It's really terrible. If this continues, will Yunze still be able to work properly? Mr. Ji, I think this is not appropriate. Xiao Tongyu refused tactfully. Yunze straightened up, a wave of anger rising to his face again. Secretary Xiao, whatever I say is what it is. He threw a key to Xiao Tongyu, the key to the iron gate. I'll send you the password to the gate. Go there first after get off work. Seeing Yunze's expression, Xiao Tongyu instantly understood that this was an order and could not be disobeyed. Okay, Mr. Ji, I'll be out first. Xiao Tongyu sighed, took the key and turned around and walked out of the office. After get off work, Xiao Tongyu went home to get some clothes to change, and drove directly to Yunze's villa. The villa is located in a feng shui treasure land in the center of the imperial city. Just like New York's Central Park, it is located in the downtown area, but when you walk into this villa area, you will suddenly feel quiet and have a sense of being in a paradise. Yunze's villa occupies the top position in the community. It is a 3-story standalone building with a large black iron gate with hollow carvings, and off-white walls combined with light red tile roofs. Xiao Tongyu thought that in such a big house, Yunze was the only one living there usually, and the maid would come to clean once a week, so he was not afraid. She drove the car through the iron gate and parked it in front of the lawn in front of the villa. Enter the code to enter the living room, which is spacious and bright, with a large fireplace and huge floor-to-ceiling windows that offer views of the garden behind. It is indeed big and luxurious, but it gives people a cold and deserted feeling, without any breath of life. Xiao Tongyu put down her bag and walked into the kitchen. After opening the refrigerator, she almost fainted. The refrigerator was neatly filled with rows of Yunze's exclusive Swiss mineral water, and nothing else. Yunze, is he living on a breath of spiritual energy? Xiao Tongyu hesitated for a minute, but still opened the grocery shopping app on her phone and bought a lot of meat, vegetables, fruits, various seasonings, juice, ice cream, and everything she wanted to eat. Even if Yunze didn't eat, she didn't want to starve to death in this place. If he wanted to scold her, let him do it. It would be best if he could just throw her out. The delivery man delivered the food in a short while. Xiao Tongyu changed into a comfortable short sweatshirt and loose sweatpants, tied her long hair into a high ponytail, and started to work in the kitchen. Since she started living alone at the age of 18, Xiao Tongyu's cooking skills are unmatched among ordinary people. Zhuang Shufei feels that eating the food she cooks can make her feel like she is in love. But today Xiao Tongyu decided to only cook her own portion, because Yunze only eats food made by star-rated hotels or their own chefs, and he thinks other people's food is dirty. At most, she can help him clean up after cooking and eating. It was less than 8 o'clock, and Xiao Tongyu had finished cooking 3 dishes and a soup. Braised spare ribs, homemade tofu, stir-fried vegetables with mushrooms, and a pot of tomato and egg soup. She was so hungry that she cooked more. Just as he was about to sit down to eat, Xiao Tongyu received a call from Zhuang Shufei. Tong, where are you? Oh. I'm not at home. I'm outside. Zhuang Shufei's excited voice came from the other end of the phone. My brother has returned to China and just got off the plane. He asked you when can we have dinner together. When Xiao Tongyu heard that Zhuang Shujie was back, his eyes sparkled and he felt warm in his heart. As long as Ji's family is fine, I'm available anytime. Now then. Where are you? We'll come find you. Xiao Tongyu quickly refused, not now. Zhuang Shufei was puzzled, with a hint of speculation in her tone. Tong, where are you? You are not with Yunze, are you? There was a cry of surprise from the other end of the phone. Oh my god, Tong Tong. Are you falling in love with Ji Yunze? Fei Fei. Don't talk nonsense, of course not. It was Ji Yunze who threatened me. Tong Tong, who is Ji Yunze? If you follow him, he will only make you tired of him and dump you. Xiao Tongyu whispered, it would be great if he could dump me now. Zhuang Shufei was so anxious that she was about to explode. But the other party was Ji Yunze, and no matter how anxious she was still powerless. She whispered, take it easy on yourself. Tell me if you have any problems. Also, don't let my brother know about this. Xiao Tongyu put down the phone, feeling a little powerless. It was like being stuck in a quagmire, trying hard to climb out, but being hit on the head with a heavy hammer, falling down again, sinking deeper and deeper. She sat at the table and suddenly lost her appetite when she saw the delicious food. She, Xiao Tongyu, couldn't just sit there and wait for death. She had to find a way to get rid of Ji Yunze. At this moment, beep. The combination lock opened. Xiao Tongyu thought it was Ji Yunze who came back. She stood up, but saw a dignified and elegant middle-aged woman standing at the door. She was wearing a high-end flannel suit, her hair was tied up high, she had light makeup on, and her skin was fair and rosy. At first glance, she looked noble and somewhat unapproachable. Seeing Xiao Tongyu, the woman frowned slightly. Who are you? Chapter 20, just for fun, throw it away when you get bored. After a moment of daze, Xiao Tongyu's face immediately returned to calm. This woman, who looked extraordinary at first glance, was dressed in an indescribable noble manner. She had the key to the iron door and knew the password to Ji Yunze's villa, so she must be. Hello, Madam Ji, Xiao Tongyu quickly bowed and said, I am President Ji's secretary, my name is Xiao Tongyu. Qianshu calmly looked at the woman in front of him. She was fair-skinned, beautiful, and had a curvy figure. She looked sweet and charming, so pure that it was hard to look away. She was wearing comfortable home clothes and there were several steaming meals on the table. A person appeared in Ji Yunze's villa in a dignified manner, and the relationship between them didn't look like that of an ordinary secretary and boss at all. Qianshu thought of their gynecological special ointment that fell out of Ji Yunze's pocket before. Could it be that this secretary Xiao was the owner of the ointment? Seeing Qianshu's scrutinizing look, Xiao Tongyu quickly explained, I'm here to help Mr. Ji cook some food. He'll be back soon. Since Madam Ji is here, I'll leave first. Although he looked calm on the surface, Xiao Tongyu was nervous inside. It is said that Mrs. Ji is the daughter of Jiangcheng. She can give birth to a terrible man like Ji Yunze, so she must not be a character to be messed with. He should escape quickly while Ji Yunze is not back. With Mrs. Ji as an excuse, he should be able to keep quiet for a while. Xiao Tongyu picked up her bag and was about to walk out the door when Ji Yunze's voice came from behind Qianshu. Secretary Xiao, where are you going? Xiao Tongyu was shocked. Could it be that even though Madam Ji was here, Ji Yunze was not going to let her go? Wasn't he afraid of being scolded by Madam Ji for bringing a woman home for no apparent reason? Without waiting for Xiao Tongyu to answer, Ji Yunze stepped into the living room and slammed the door shut. The meaning is very clear, Xiao Tongyu, you are not allowed to leave. When Ji Yunze's car drove into the gate, he saw Xiao Tongyu's car and Qianshu's car parked in front of the villa at the same time, and he knew they had met. Ji Yunze frowned at Qianshu, Mom, why are you here? Qianshu crossed his arms, smiled and gave Ji Yunze a meaningful look. I came to see you, I'm afraid you'd starve to death. Then, she glanced at the table of food prepared by Xiao Tongyu. It seems that you will not starve to death. Ji Yunze also saw the dishes made by Xiao Tongyu, and a burst of anger instantly appeared on his face. He has always been a germaphobe. Did this woman treat this place as her own home? What kind of mess was she making in his kitchen? Secretary Xiao, throw away their vegetables. Ji Yunze turned and went upstairs. Don't throw them in the kitchen trash can. Qianshu chuckled and followed Ji Yunze upstairs. He turned to Xiao Tongyu and added, Secretary Xiao, please make 2 cups of tea and send them to the study. Thank you. Xiao Tongyu was stunned. The dish that had been cooked with great difficulty had to be thrown away, and it couldn't be thrown into the kitchen trash can. Should it be thrown into the lawn of the villa or into the main road? Also, where is the tea in Ji Yunze's house? Where can I make tea? Study on the 2nd floor. Ji Yunze sat at the desk, took off his suit, tore off his tie, and threw it casually on the sofa. He rolled up his white shirt to his elbows, revealing his fair and muscular arms. Qianshu sat down and rolled his eyes at his son. Okay, Secretary Xiao is not here, there is no need to show off in front of your mother. Yunze didn't say anything. He crossed his legs and lit a cigarette. Why, after living for almost 30 years, you finally miss a woman? Yeah. Yunze did not deny it and slowly exhaled a smoke ring. Have you checked? I checked it. The background is clean. The person is clean. It's their first time. Qianshu sneered. She didn't expect that her son had a virgin complex. Should I go back and tell your grandfather the good news? Yunze flicked the ash into the ashtray with his slender fingers. No need, just for fun. Throw it away when you get tired of it. Take it easy, be careful and don't get anyone killed, she warned. It doesn't matter. If anything goes wrong, just let her have an abortion. There was no emotion in Yunze's tone, as if he was discussing with Qianshu what to eat tonight instead of ending a little life. On the other side, Xiao Tongyu rummaged through the drawers and cabinets in the kitchen but couldn't find any tea. There was really no other way, she could only take out the packaged black tea she had bought on the grocery shopping app, brew 2 cups and bring them to the study on the second floor. I wonder if Yunze, who never drinks packaged tea, will just smash the teacup to the ground. Just as he was about to knock on the door, Xiao Tongyu heard Yunze's cold voice coming from the half-open door. No need, just for fun. Throw it away when you get tired of it. It doesn't matter. If anything goes wrong, just let her have an abortion. Even though he already knew what position he was in, Xiao Tongyu still felt a sharp pain in his heart when he heard Yunze say this in person. Sure enough, she was not a person at all in Yunze's heart. He had no sympathy for her. Don't worry, she would never let herself get pregnant with such a ruthless man. Thinking of this, Xiao Tongyu adjusted his breathing, knocked on the door and went in with a smile. Mrs. G, Mr. G, the tea is here. After Mrs. G left, Yunze saw that the food on the table was still there, and his blood pressure soared. Secretary Xiao, are you deaf? Seeing Yunze's eyes full of hostility, Xiao Tongyu immediately understood what he meant. Boss G, I'm going to throw these dishes into my own stomach. Give me 10 minutes and I promise they will all disappear. Yunze's face turned cold, and the air around him seemed to freeze. Seeing that he didn't say anything, Xiao Tongyu assumed that she had his consent, sat down and started eating. Anyway, Yunze didn't treat her as a human being. She would have to go to the gates of hell anyway at night. She might not be able to return to the world of the living alive. It would be better for her to die a full ghost. Xiao Tongyu picked up a large piece of braised pork ribs and put it into his mouth, then took 2 big mouthfuls of rice and continued to stuff himself with 2 pieces of homemade tofu. Yunze looked at the way the woman in front of him ate. She was completely different from the young ladies he had seen who ate rice grain by grain. She puffed her cheeks, and her pink face looked a little chubby, pure and charming. Her big fluttering eyes stared straight at the food, which made Yunze unable to tell whether it was the food that made him appetizing, or this woman that made him appetizing. Although he had already eaten dinner, he suddenly felt hungry again. He walked to the table. Secretary Xiao, stand up. Xiao Tongyu stared at him in disbelief with eyes wide open. Stand up. She immediately put down her chopsticks and stood up, still chewing slightly with her mouth full of food. Yunze sat down, picked up Xiao Tongyu's chopsticks and started rummaging in the bowl of braised spare ribs. Finally, he selected a piece that suited his taste in color, shape and size, held it in front of his eyes and looked at it repeatedly for 2 minutes. He didn't know if he was looking for garbage or was afraid that Xiao Tongyu would poison him. Finally, he took a smell, and the maillard reaction produced by the high-temperature cooking of the pork, along with the aroma of onions, rushed into his nostrils. He couldn't help but take a bite. Xiao Tongyu? Once he took a bite, he couldn't stop. Yunze finished the whole piece of ribs in no time. Xiao Tongyu? Doesn't Yunze only eat food from 5-star hotels and made by his own chef? What's the point of eating her food? Mr. G, I have eaten these chopsticks and rice before. Xiao Tongyu whispered a reminder, but Yunze completely ignored her. In a short while, the 3 dishes, 1 soup and a bowl of rice were all in Yunze's stomach. Well, now you don't have to worry about having nowhere to throw the food. Chapter 21 Mr. G, give me a deadline. Xiao Tongyu was speechless as he looked at the food on the table that had been cleared away. She had only taken a few bites when Yunze snatched them all away. Is this man still a human being? He even wants to steal other people's food. After eating, Yunze stood up. Clean up, take a shower, and come meet me upstairs in the master bedroom. After saying that, he turned around and went upstairs with an expressionless face. Xiao Tongyu finally understood that Yunze was going to eat her up while she was hungry and leave no chance for her to survive. Helplessly, Xiao Tongyu picked up the bananas and oranges he had just bought on the grocery shopping app and started eating them silently. She was feeling a little down. Although she has never been in a good mood since Yunze targeted her. Xiao Tongyu could obviously become a designer in the most famous architectural design company in the country, or go to the UK for further studies. She even passed the IELTS test. It's a pity that because of the inexplicable desire for revenge, he ruined a good hand of cards. If she had chosen a different path, she might have a boyfriend by now, and might be getting married soon like Suru. What is she now? She is about to be played to pieces by Yunze. Thinking of this, Xiao Tongyu stood up. She couldn't just sit there and wait to die. After taking a shower, Xiao Tongyu knocked on the door of the master bedroom. Yunze had already changed into a set of dark grey silk pajamas and was sitting on the bed. For the first time ever, he did not look at the documents or the computer. Instead, he stared straight at the door, waiting for Xiao Tongyu to come in. This woman had some magical power that made him unable to wait any longer. Xiao Tongyu specially brought a set of conservative pajamas. Long sleeves and long pants, covering herself up tightly. The pink lace and cute cartoon rabbits in the pajamas made her look even more pure after taking a bath and without makeup, which aroused Yunze's desire to completely possess her. Xiao Tongyu did not go to bed directly. She walked to Yunze's side, biting her lips, as if she had made a great decision. Boss G, I want to talk to you. We'll talk about it after we do it. No, let's talk about it now. Yunze looked grim. Secretary Xiao, who gave you the courage to talk to me? After saying that, he grabbed Xiao Tongyu's hand. Xiao Tongyu felt dizzy and her whole body was pressed under Yunze. Their eyes met. The fire of desire burning in Yunze's dark eyes fell on Xiao Tongyu's face without any scruples. Yunze pinched her little face with one hand and said to him, "Are you afraid of me? Isn't Secretary Xiao very skilled? Why don't you hit me?" Xiao Tongyu was shocked. How did he know that she was very skilled? Did he even investigate this? I don't dare to fight because I'm afraid of going to jail. Yunze showed an increasingly evil smile. I gave you a chance, but you gave up on your own. The next second, he roughly blocked her lips. She instinctively struggled desperately under him, but it was useless. Secretary Xiao, you don't need to wear clothes when you enter my room from now on. From 10 o'clock to 1 o'clock in the morning, Xiao Tongyu felt that he was about to die in this bed. Finally, she grabbed Yunze's arm and begged for mercy, and he let her go. Xiao Tongyu was half sitting on the bed, hugging the quilt. Her rosy little mouth was red and swollen, and her bangs were wet with sweat, making her originally pink face even redder. The neck and collarbone, wherever the eye could see, were all purple and red. Yunze stared at her, unable to move his eyes away. He wanted her again, but she looked a little pitiful. Xiao Tongyu spoke weakly, "Boss G, can you talk to me now?" Yunze frowned. He was in a good mood after spending 3 hours with Xiao Tongyu, but who knew this woman wanted to talk to him? What on earth did she want to talk about? Did she want money? Explain. Xiao Tongyu licked her lips, adding another layer of attractive luster to her small mouth. Mr. G, I want you to give me a time limit. What's the meaning? When will President G get tired of me? Give me a deadline. Xiao Tongyu's eyes were filled with mist. I want to see some light in these dark days. In an instant, Yunze's face turned pale and veins bulged on his forehead. There had always been women who were eager to climb into his bed, but Xiao Tongyu was so eager to get rid of him. Secretary Xiao, do you think you are qualified to talk to me about this? Xiao Tongyu instinctively moved back and pressed his whole body against the bed. Seeing Yunze's face filled with anger, she knew that this was just another one of her wishful thinking. I originally thought that after investigating me, President G would have a little sympathy for me, and that President G would treat me as a human being. It seems that I thought too much. I just realized how difficult it is to be a human being. I'm sorry, Mr. G, I overstepped my bounds. I'm not qualified to discuss this with you. Xiao Tongyu said this lightly, turned around and lay down. She had her back to Yunze, her shoulders trembling uncontrollably and tears streaming down her cheeks. Ever since she gave up on Lin Xiao and moved out of the Lin family, she thought her tears had long since dried up. Actually, not. It turns out that for Xiao Tongyu, all their ups and downs in life are not the most painful, but only more painful. Yunze looked at her back, feeling inexplicably irritated and a little worried. He knew she was crying. He didn't want to let her go, nor was he going to let her go. He didn't know what would happen in the future, but at least at this moment, he'd better keep Xiao Tongyu by his side for the rest of his life. As if by magic, Yunze approached her. He pressed against her back, and the renewed contact of skin made Xiao Tongyu tremble all over. She thought Yunze was going to make a comeback again. Who knew that Yunze leaned over and gently kissed away the tears on Xiao Tongyu's face. The sudden tenderness made Xiao Tongyu panic. She turned around and looked at Yunze in surprise, her big eyes full of confusion. Yunze reached out and wiped away the tears from the corners of her eyes, and whispered, "Then 1 year." Seeing that he relaxed, Xiao Tongyu blinked, revealing a pure and innocent look. "Mr. G, you can't lie." Yunze couldn't help but give this lovely woman a passionate and lingering kiss. "Then let's wait for a year. Maybe by then he will be tired of it and no longer be obsessed with this woman." However, Yunze always had a strong premonition in his heart that it might be more likely to last a lifetime than a year. If Xiao Tongyu wants to leave after 1 year, will he let her go? Of course not. He is the most shameless Yunze in the world, and nothing he wants can escape. Chapter 22. Secretary Xiao looks so pretty even when she cries. Early in the morning on the weekend, Xiao Tongyu's white Audi was driving on the winding mountain road. The road winds like a giant dragon circling among the mountains, tightly connecting the earth and the sky. Xiao Tongyu was holding the steering wheel. On the passenger seat were the newly purchased yellow and white chrysanthemums, calla lilies, and her favorite baby's breath. Although Qingming Festival is still half a year away, she wants to go to the cemetery to see her parents today because she misses them. The car parked in the cemetery's parking lot. Xiao Tongyu took the flowers and walked up the mountain stairs step by step. Her grandparents died very early and her mother was an orphan, so she had no relatives in this world. Ever since my parents passed away unexpectedly, the only people who come here during the Qingming Festival every year, besides Xiao Tongyu, are Uncle Wang and Aunt Shu. As for the Lin family, who were on good terms with them when their parents were alive, they had never come once. When she arrived at her parents' grave, Xiao Tongyu put down the flowers, took out a handkerchief from her pocket, and wiped the black granite tombstone until it sparkled. Over and over again, tirelessly. There are photos of the father and mother on the left and right sides of the tombstone, and below it is written, "My beloved daughter Xiao Tongyu," and the date is 13 years ago. She was only 11 years old at that time, and now she is 24 years old. Seeing the photos of his parents, Xiao Tongyu couldn't help himself any longer. She knelt in front of the tomb, tears falling one by one, dripping onto the clean and shiny tombstone. She wiped them with her sleeves, as if she couldn't bear to see her parents' tombstone soaked with tears. But her tears were like pearls that had broken off the string, and no matter how hard she tried to wipe them away, she just couldn't stop. Finally, she gave up. The crying sound changed from sobbing to wailing, letting the tears drip down the cheeks unrestrainedly. "Mom and Dad, I'm sorry, I haven't found the person who hurt you back then, and I haven't grown up to be the person you hoped for. The Lin family doesn't like me, and brother Lin Xiao hates me too. Why doesn't anyone in this world cherish me? Why don't you take me with you? Why leave me here alone?" I don't know how long I cried. Xiao Tongyu was tired. She sat in front of the grave, staring blankly at the ground. After venting her anger, life still had to go on. She wiped away her tears and stood up. On the other hand, today is my grandfather's Memorial Day, and Luo Juanji accompanied his mother Sun Shuping to pay tribute to him. It was not Qingming Festival, so there were not many people coming to the cemetery to worship, and the whole mountain was quiet. Suddenly, a young girl's heart-wrenching cry came from the other side of my feet, like a wounded wolf howling in the middle of the night, with misery mixed with endless pain. Sun Shuping couldn't help smacking her lips. Which girl has lost another loved one? How pitiful. Luo Juanji always felt that their voice sounded familiar. He turned to Sun Shuping and said, "Mom, I'll go check it out. You and the driver wait for me in the parking lot." Sun Shuping glanced at her son and asked, "What's wrong? Is it your old lover?" She knew that her son was a philanderer, but he knew his limits and would never cause a commotion at home or in the hospital, so she turned a blind eye. Luo Juanji said impatiently, Oh, no, Mom, I'm just curious. I don't have a girlfriend recently. Okay, go ahead. If it's someone you know, comfort them. They are really pitiful, Sun Shuping said. By the way, when will you find me a daughter-in-law to bring home? When Luo Juanji heard Sun Shuping mention this again, he pretended to be dumbfounded and ran towards the direction of the voice as if escaping. When Xiao Tongyu turned around, she saw Luo Juanji standing behind her. She was so scared that she almost fell to the ground. Mr. Luo, what a coincidence. How come you walk without making any sound? Luo Juanji was moved when he saw tears on Xiao Tongyu's porcelain white face and red eyes. The photo he had taken when she wasn't paying attention was still in his phone, so he had to show it to Yunze. He glanced at the words on the tombstone behind Xiao Tongyu, "Come to see my parents? Is today their memorial day?" Xiao Tongyu shook his head, "No, I just miss them." "Where is Luo Xiao?" "Oh, I'm here to see my grandpa. I'm leaving soon, would you like to join me?" Seeing that Xiao Tongyu looked so sad, Luo Juanji put away his usual playful attitude and became serious. "Yeah, okay. I'm going to the parking lot too." The two chatted casually. When they arrived at the parking lot and were about to say goodbye, suddenly, Xiao Tongyu heard a friendly call from behind. "Tong Tong." Xiao Tongyu was stunned. What day was it today? Why did he run into so many familiar people just by visiting the graves? She looked back and saw Su Ru running towards her with a man. Luo Juanji's eyes lit up. "It's Su Ru. The one next to her, is that her boyfriend?" As she approached them, Su Ru noticed Luo Juanji and suddenly regretted not waiting until he left before calling Xiao Tongyu. "Ru, your boyfriend?" Xiao Tongyu asked with a smile. Su Ru pulled the man next to her affectionately. "Yes, my boyfriend, Jinshu. Jinshu is tall, wears glasses, and looks gentle and clean. I heard that he is Su Ru's college classmate." Xiao Tongyu nodded and greeted, "Hello, I am Ruru's colleague." "Hello." Su Ru completely ignored Luo Juanji's existence. Luo Juanji had always been a popular legend among women, but he was suddenly ignored, which made his young heart feel hurt. At this time, Jinshu's eyes were fixed on Xiao Tongyu's face. She had an exceptionally pretty face, pure and voluptuous. Her body was white and thin, but she had gained weight where it was necessary. Of course, Jinshu's direct gaze did not escape Luo Juanji's eyes. He sneered. "Har har, it seems that Su Ru's boyfriend is not that good." Su Ru saw Xiao Tongyu's slightly red and swollen eyes, and couldn't help feeling distressed when she thought of how she once said that her parents died when she was very young. So she turned to Jinshu and said, "I remembered that I have something to do with Tong Tong. Why don't you go back first?" Jinshu nodded, said hello and left. When he turned back, he did not forget to look at Xiao Tongyu twice. Luo Juanji thought that if he took a picture of this guy's obscene appearance and sent it to Yunze, his eyes would be dug out before the next day. After Jinshu left, Luo Juanji asked Su Ru with a smile, "Did Secretary Su not see me?" As a last resort, Su Ru could only symbolically glance at Luo Juanji and said, "Mr. Luo, I'm sorry. Ruru and I have something to do. Let's make an appointment next time when we are free." After hearing what Su Ru said, Luo Juanji immediately became interested. "Oh? When is the next time?" Su Ru was speechless. She had just said it out of politeness, but who knew Luo Juanji would take it seriously? Xiao Tongyu quickly came to her rescue. "Mr. Luo, please stop teasing Ruru. She is shy." After saying that, she pulled Su Ru over and walked towards her car. "We're leaving first. Goodbye, Mr. Luo." Luo Juanji looked at the backs of the two girls as they left, picked up his phone and sent the photo of Xiao Tongyu's profile that he had taken in front of the tomb to Yunze. TSK, Secretary Xiao looks so pretty even when she's crying." The next second, Yunze replied, "At 9 o'clock in the evening, Hanyu's club, I will beat you to death." "Fuck, are you trying to kill me? I'm not gay." Luo Juanji smiled and put his phone back in his pocket. Chapter 23: A Man Without Common Sense. In the car, Xiao Tongyu gripped the steering wheel tightly, and the white Audi sped down the mountain on the winding mountain road. Su Ru couldn't help but sigh. "Wow, Tong Tong, this is my first time riding in your car, you are such a great driver." Xiao Tongyu smiled and said, "It's okay. Ruru, why did you come to the cemetery today?" "I accompanied Jinshu to visit his mother." His mother died of illness a few years ago. Is that so? Xiao Tongyu thought. Su Ru and her boyfriend were about to get married, so it was natural for her to come and visit his deceased mother. Tong Tong, are you here to see our parents? How come you ran into Luo Xiao? Why is he everywhere? Su Ru pouted. Su Ru is pretty and well behaved, and her appearance makes men particularly want to protect her. Yeah, things haven't been going well for me lately, so I miss my parents a little bit, Xiao Tongyu said lightly. Ru, why do you hate Luo Xiao so much? I think he's a good guy. Su Ru turned away and said, I don't like men who are good at sweet talk. In comparison, a man like Mr. Ji who is frugal with words is better. When Xiao Tongyu heard Su Ru mention Ji Yunze, he couldn't help but shudder all over. Ji Yunze, when he puts on clothes, he is an abstinent overbearing boss, but when he takes off his clothes, he is a beast worse than pigs and dogs. So she quickly changed the subject. By the way, Ruru, what do you want to talk to me about? Have you found a place for lunch? I want to have hot pot with you. Sure. The two came to a popular hot pot restaurant in the city center. It took a long time to drive back from the cemetery on Didu Mountain. It was past dinner time and there were fewer diners in the restaurant. The two girls sat down facing each other, and Su Ru ordered a table full of dishes. Xiao Tongyu looked at the various meatballs and vegetable desserts and didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She knew that Su Ru had always been a person with big eyes and a small appetite, so how could the two of them possibly finish so much food? The boiling hot pot is emitting tempting steam, the meat slices absorb the rich soup base, and every bite is full of happiness. Xiao Tongyu suddenly felt that being alive was good, at least he could eat his favorite food. The heat from the hot pot made her sweat, so she lifted her long hair and tried to tie it into a ponytail with the rubber band on her wrist. Suddenly, she felt the meaningful gaze from Su Ru opposite her, and quickly let her hair down. Tong Tong, tie your hair up if you're hot. I've seen it a long time ago. Su Ru said to her with a smile. Xiao Tongyu's face turned red all the way to her ears, and she almost dropped the chopsticks she had just picked up. You know everything. Su Ru nodded. Boss Ji always calls you into the office, and you stay there for a long time. You always come out in a panic. It's not like I don't have eyes. Xiao Tongyu didn't know what to say. She bit her lip and felt like a fool. She thought that the affair between her and Ji Yunze could be hidden from everyone. In fact, they all knew about it, but they were just pretending to be stupid. Seeing Xiao Tongyu blushing and not speaking, Su Ru smiled and comforted her. It's okay, Tong Tong, I won't tell. It's just that President Ji is too harsh with his words, always making you red here and there. I sit next to you and feel distressed every time I see you. Finally finding someone to talk to in the same company, Xiao Tongyu picked up the iced coke on the table and drank it all in one gulp. She wiped her mouth and slapped the table. I'm telling you, Ruru, this bastard Ji Yunze is really not a human being. He slept with me several times, and I almost died in bed several times. Su Ru's eyes widened in shock. Is this true? Isn't President Ji an obstinate man? I've worked in the CEO's office for 3 years and have never seen him have a woman. I've also heard that he never gets close to women. You're the first one. Xiao Tongyu's eyes were rolling up to the sky. Not interested in women? She was also fooled by this rumor. Ji Yunze simply wanted to sleep in the land of tenderness all the time. By the way, Tong Tong, Su Ru asked, has Mr. Ji been coveting you for a long time? In fact, I felt a long time ago that the way he looks at you is different from the way he looks at others. Whatever. Anyway, it happened 2 weeks ago. After the party, I sent him back to his room. He suddenly went berserk. It was useless for me to cry and beg him. Thinking of this, Xiao Tongyu felt uncomfortable again. She didn't intend to tell Su Ru that she was the one who seduced Ji Yunze first, intentionally or unintentionally. Because her purpose is so stupid. Su Ru hesitated for a moment and asked, so, is this your first time? There was a moment of silence at the dinner table. Seeing Xiao Tongyu's sad expression, Su Ru felt a little bit sorry for her. So she comforted him. But Tong Tong, do you think you are cool? You can sleep with Mr. Ji, with his looks and figure, and he is a man at the top of the pyramid, you are not at a disadvantage. Xiao Tongyu almost laughed out loud. Ru, your theory is quite unique. Being forced to sleep with a man you don't love, even if he is the king of the world, you won't feel cool. Su Ru nodded. That makes sense. Then what are you going to do? Thinking of this, Xiao Tongyu became annoyed. I don't know. When Mr. G finally comes to his senses and falls in love with another woman, he should be able to let me go. Well, no wonder you wanted to quit that day. Xiao Tongyu scratched his hair. Roo, let's not talk about this, it's annoying. Let's eat, eating is the happiest thing. Good. 9 o'clock in the evening, Hanyu's Seiju Club. This club was opened by Hanyu himself and had nothing to do with the Han family. However, because of the Han family's influence in the imperial capital, it attracted many wealthy young masters in that circle to linger. In the VIP box, Yunze had already drunk his 5th glass of red wine. Seeing that the bottle of red wine he had just opened was half gone, Hanyu couldn't help but ask, "What's the matter?" "No, woman, so you're drinking to drown your sorrows." Yunze gave him a glare. If Hanyu hadn't been his good friend since childhood, the red wine bottle would have hit him on the head. Luo Juanji held a cigarette between his legs and leaned back on the sofa cushions. Hanyu, get him 2 women. He's cold and not used to doing things by himself. He can't sleep if he doesn't make fire by drilling wood every day. Yunze's face darkened, and he turned to face Luo Juanji. How about you help me? Hanyu felt his eyes burn when he thought of that scene. You two should help each other, don't stay here with me. There is a public toilet on the left side of the door. Goodbye. Oh. Luo Juanji extinguished his cigarette. Why should I do it myself? I'm not picky. Who is like Yunze? He has to have Xiao Tongyu, otherwise he can't get hard. As soon as he finished speaking, Yunze stretched out his leg and kicked Luo Juanji, causing him to cry for help on the sofa. In fact, Yunze had already found it strange. The world is so big, with so many women, why did he have to have Xiao Tongyu? He felt disgusted when he saw other women, but when he saw Xiao Tongyu, he was burning with desire and couldn't stop it. Unconvinced by being kicked, Luo Juanji struggled to get up and continued to tease him. Yunze, a man like you who doesn't know how to cherish women, Xiao Tongyu will run away sooner or later. Yunze frowned. Cherishing women. Huh? Don't tell me you don't understand. Yunze, women need to be loved, not vented to death. What's the meaning? Seeing Yunze getting serious, Hanyu almost laughed out loud. Luo Juanji held his forehead with his hand. Could it be that this emotional idiot is finally coming to his senses? He tugged at Hanyu and said, "Explain it to him." Hanyu waved his hand. "You should do this kind of thing." Luo Juanji acted like a professor about to give a lecture, sitting upright and leaning forward. First of all, the most basic thing is that when you play with a woman, you must use a condom. How can you let her take birth control pills? Why? Yunze, your common sense has been eaten by a dog. How harmful are birth control pills to women? If you directly let people take birth control pills, women will think that you don't care about them at all. How can she be sincere to you? Yunze said seriously, "What's the harm?" "Oh, that would cause a lot of harm." As a doctor, Luo Juanji was very good at this question. At the mildest, it could cause loss of appetite, headache, fatigue, endocrine disorders, and menstrual disorders. At the worst, it could cause. He paused and deliberately lengthened his tone. Ovarian function is damaged, and infertility. For a moment, a rare look of panic flashed across Yunze's face. He raised his leg and kicked Luo Juanji hard. "Why didn't you say so earlier?" Luo Juanji was kicked upside down and yelled angrily, "How the hell do I know you don't even have this much common sense?" Chapter 24 Saiju's Drinking Party. In the evening, Xiao Tongyu had just finished taking a shower and was lying on the bed applying a facial mask. The bronze speaker next to her was playing her favorite Chopin nocturne in E-flat major, Op. 9. Come to think of it, she started learning cello at the age of 4, but hasn't touched a cello since her parents died unexpectedly when she was 11. The ethereal sound of the piano coming from the speakers was like celestial music coming from outer space, causing Xiao Tongyu to slowly close his eyes. Suddenly, a shrill cell phone ringtone sounded, and a male voice that deserved a beating kept singing, "I won't answer it, I won't answer it, I just won't answer it." Xiao Tongyu, who was already asleep, jumped up in fright. This was the exclusive ringtone she set specifically for Yunze's phone. She tore off her mask and pressed the call button. "Hello? President G. Secretary Xiao, come to Seiju, VIP box number 1. Now." Xiao Tongyu glanced at the clock on the wall. It was already past 10 o'clock in the evening. Yunze's cold voice came from the other end of the phone. "What? Secretary Xiao doesn't seem to be willing. Xiao Tongyu stammered, Boss G. I'm taking a break today. Secretary Xiao wants overtime pay? Is 1 million enough? When Xiao Tongyu thought of Ji Yunze's 1 million, all the hairs on his body stood up. No need, Mr. G, I'll come right away. After hanging up the phone, Xiao Tongyu casually changed into a loose sweatshirt and tight jeans, and tied his hair diagonally to one side with a hairband. She took her car keys, put on her sneakers and went out. After getting in the car, Xiao Tongyu suddenly thought, if she was going to a place like Siju where there were all kinds of lights and wine, should she put on some delicate makeup and wear a sexy dress? Oh, never mind. She's already out. If Ji Yunze thinks she's embarrassing, it would be best if he could just send her back home. Xiao Tongyu opened the door of the box, and the three men sitting inside raised their eyes at the same time. Even in the dim light, you can clearly see her rosy face, small and delicate mouth and big eyes. Coupled with her outfit, when she came to a place like Siju, she looked like a college student who had strayed into the secular world. Seeing Xiao Tongyu like this, Ji Yunze suddenly felt that he looked a little old in a suit. Boss Ji, young Master Han, young Master Luo. Xiao Tongyu nodded and greeted him. She stood aside hesitantly, not knowing what the three most famous bachelors in the imperial capital wanted to do by calling her here. Luo Juanji smiled and said, Secretary Xiao, you're not sleepy yet, are you? I asked you to come over for a drink. How can you stay at home on such a good weekend? Luo Juanji didn't dare to say that it was actually Ji Yunze who missed her. Just now, Ji Yunze was drinking and looking at his phone absent-mindedly, his eyes fixed on the page with Xiao Tongyu's phone number, unable to move away. Finally, Han Yu couldn't bear it anymore, so he pressed the call button for him and pushed Ji Yunze against the bar. Xiao Tongyu evaded the question, Mr. Luo, I'm not very good at drinking. It's okay, just 2 drinks, you won't get drunk. Luo Juanji cast a meaningful look at Ji Yunze. If you get drunk, your President Ji can still take you home. Well, it seems that it is a secret known to everyone that Ji Yunze slept with me. Xiao Tongyu actually got used to being teased like this, and she felt that her skin was getting thicker and thicker. Han Yu poured a glass of red wine for Xiao Tongyu and handed it to her. Secretary Xiao, try this, it's top quality. Xiao Tongyu took the red wine but did not sit down. He just stood there in a daze. Luo Juanji spoke up, Hey Secretary Xiao, please sit down. No, I can just stand. I'm Mr. Ji's secretary, it's not appropriate for me to sit down. How could Xiao Tongyu dare to sit next to Ji Yunze? As far as she could remember, except in the car, she seemed to have never sat with Ji Yunze, let alone drinking together. Even after that night at the Imperial Capital Hotel, when Ji Yunze sat down to eat breakfast, she could only stand by and watch. She was so hungry that she almost died on the spot. Ji Yunze, who had been silent all this time, suddenly spoke, Secretary Xiao, sit down. Does Secretary Xiao need to wear hearing aids? No. Xiao Tongyu quickly sat next to Ji Yunze. She picked up the goblet in her hand and drank it all in one gulp. A cold, sour feeling rushed straight into her throat, with a slightly bitter aftertaste, just like her life. This is not a top-grade red wine at all. It's not even as delicious as Coke. Secretary Xiao has a good alcohol tolerance. Han Yu filled her glass again. Mr. Han, let me do it. How can I let you pour me a glass of wine? Han Yu smiled secretly. Looking at Ji Yunze's attitude, maybe one day Xiao Tongyu will become the young lady of the Ji family, and there will be times when he will pour wine for her. Luo Juanji saw Ji Yunze staring at Xiao Tongyu's face without saying a word. His eyes were full of animal desire and were about to spray on the girl's face. But in the current situation, it seemed a little unreasonable to directly drag Xiao Tongyu to Saiju's suite upstairs. After all, Ji Yunze didn't want others to see how much he needed Xiao Tongyu. Regardless of whether Ji Yunze is motivated by his body or his heart, Luo Juanji decides to help him. Secretary Xiao, how about we play a game? What game? Secretary Xiao can ask me any questions. If I don't want to answer or can't answer, I have to drink a glass of red wine. And I do the same to Secretary Xiao. This. Mr. Luo, I don't have any questions for you. Luo Juanji felt insulted. Is Secretary Xiao not interested in me at all? Xiao Tongyu shook his head, not interested. Han Yu tried hard not to laugh out loud. Luo Juanji was so angry that he slammed the table. Then you play with Ji Yunze? Xiao Tongyu turned her head and glanced at Ji Yunze's face, which was so dark that ink was almost dripping out. He was also looking at her. She couldn't help but shrink her neck. "I'm sorry, Mr. Luo, I'd better play with you." Luo Juanji spoke up. "First question, how many boyfriends has Secretary Xiao had?" "I've never been in love." "Is this true?" "Secretary Xiao, you can't lie to others. Even if you lie, you still have to drink." "Really, Mr. Luo, not many people like me." Luo Juanji was shocked. He glanced at Ji Yunze and met his meaningful gaze. "Shit. Ji Yunze actually raped a virgin." "Okay," Luo Juanji agreed with the answer, "then you ask me." I can't think of any questions, so I'll ask you the same question that Luo Xiao asked me just now." "I really can't answer this question, because I don't remember how many girlfriends I've had." After saying that, Luo Juanji drank the red wine in one gulp. Xiao Tongyu curled her lips. Sure enough, the rumors about Luo Xiao were true. He was indeed the most romantic young man in the capital. Luo Juanji immediately asked the second question: has Secretary Xiao ever had a crush on someone else? When Xiao Tongyu heard this question, Lin Xiao's figure immediately emerged in his mind. Tall, wearing a blue and white school uniform, black headphones, and a pair of deep dimples when he smiled. But Lin Xiao had never smiled at her with such a brilliant smile. Xiao Tongyu was about to answer yes, when he suddenly felt a terrifying gaze coming from the side. At this moment, she thought of Ji Yunze pinching her face tightly and saying in a vicious voice, "Say you will never like Lin Xiao." Xiao Tongyu picked up the wine glass. "Mr. Luo, I toast you a glass." Han Yu and Luo Juanji looked at each other tacitly. In other words, Xiao Tongyu had a crush on someone else, but due to Ji Yunze's tyranny, she didn't dare to say it. Xiao Tongyu, who was already not very good at drinking, became a little dizzy after being deceived by Luo Juanji's tricky questions. She decided to wash her face to wake herself up. So she stood up shakily and said, "Sorry, Mr. Ji, Mr. Luo, Mr. Han, I'm going to the bathroom." Chapter 25, Putting People to Death. VIP box number 4 of the SJ Hotel. Lin Xiao was drinking with a group of investors. At this time in the middle of the night, everyone was already drunk and staggering. At this time, the men and women in the box were hugging each other, and the sounds of ambiguous love were endless. Some people had red faces, some had dazed eyes, as if they were intoxicated in a dream. Their laughter, singing, and cheers rose and fell. In this chaotic scene, Lin Xiao seemed exceptionally calm. He held his wine glass and observed everything quietly. An inexplicable loneliness surged into Lin Xiao's heart. He looked at the people around him, who were all reveling for money and power, but that was not what he wanted. It was the girl who had always been by his side but was ruthlessly ignored by him. But life is not a time machine, there is no possibility of starting over. It seems that they will spend the night in those suites of the Siju. Tonight is not without results, at least a few contracts have been negotiated. Lin Xiao stood up and walked out of the box. As soon as he stepped out of the door, he saw a familiar figure coming out of the next box. She was wearing a sweater and tight jeans that didn't fit in here, and her straight, slender legs and beautiful long hair made him unable to take his eyes away. "It's Xiao Tongyu, why is she here?" Lin Xiao walked up quickly. "Tong Tong." Xiao Tongyu turned around and saw Lin Xiao standing in front of her in a suit. He looked a little tired, and his eyes were red from drinking, which made her feel a little uneasy. "What's the matter, Lin Xiao? What's the matter?" When did Xiao Tongyu speak so coldly? It was as if he was asking a stranger with whom he had no connection at all. Lin Xiao took a step forward and approached her. "I didn't have the chance last time, but today is a good opportunity. Tong Tong, let's talk." "Lin Xiao, I've said this many times, we have nothing to talk about," Xiao Tongyu said coldly, turning around and heading towards the bathroom. Lin Xiao grabbed her arm and said, "Tong Tong, don't say those angry words. Look at me. Am I not the one you love the most? How can you let it go just like that? Were you always lying to me? Did Xiao Tongyu, who followed him around all day and called him brother Lin Xiao, really leave his world just like that? Lin Xiao, let go. I came here with President Ji today. Don't always pull me along regardless of the occasion. We are not that familiar with each other." Lin Xiao looked at Xiao Tongyu's pretty face. She looked so sweet, gentle and cuddly, why could she say such cold words? Maybe he drank too much and was a little drunk, Lin Xiao couldn't help himself. He hugged Xiao Tongyu and pushed her against the wall. Xiao Tongyu only felt a pain in his back, and his body was pressed so hard that he could hardly breathe. Tong Tong, do you really not like me? You don't want to listen to a word I say. Xiao Tongyu knew that with her current skills, it would be easy for her to break free from Lin Xiao, but she still wanted to leave him a last bit of dignity. Lin Xiao, I'm warning you for the last time. Let go and don't force me to hit you. Lin Xiao snorted, hit me. You try. After saying that, he lowered his head and kissed Xiao Tongyu's face. Xiao Tongyu was about to dodge when suddenly, clang! A red wine bottle smashed directly at Lin Xiao's head. The bottle shattered, and Lin Xiao instantly squatted on the ground in pain. His entire body was covered in red liquid, and it was hard to tell whether it was red wine or his blood. Xiao Tongyu saw Yunze standing behind Lin Xiao. His face didn't look like a human, but like a beast corroded by anger. Yunze didn't seem to be satisfied. He kicked Lin Xiao hard on the back, causing him to fall to the ground. Xiao Tongyu seemed to hear the sound of bones breaking. Lin Xiao turned over with all his strength, trying to take a look at the person who was coming, but was kicked directly in the face. Yunze kicked the man on the ground again and again with great hostility, as if he wanted to kill him. For the first time, Xiao Tongyu realized that Yunze was really as scary as the legend said. He really looked like he was going to kill someone. It turned out that Yunze's usual kindness to her was already the utmost kindness. Xiao Tongyu seemed to be under a spell of immobilization. He stood there with his mouth covered, not moving a single step. The blood in his body had stopped flowing. Han Yu and Luo Juanji rushed over, and the two of them tried their best to hold Yunze from the left and right. Stop kicking Yunze. He's not moving. Yunze, stop it. Someone's going to get killed. But Yunze would never listen to them. He gritted his teeth and said, let me go, or I'll beat you up. Xiao Tongyu finally reacted, and she rushed to Yunze and blocked him. Don't hit Mr. G. Get out of the way. Seeing that persuasion was ineffective, Xiao Tongyu gritted his teeth and hugged him. Really don't hit Mr. G, please. She raised her aggrieved little face and looked at him, her eyes filled with tears. Xiao Tongyu didn't feel sorry for Lin Xiao, she was really scared by Yunze. Secretary Xiao, are you begging me for him? Boss G, Lin Xiao is already motionless, why do you want to kill him? Xiao Tongyu hugged Yunze's arms tightly, put her head on his chest, and buried her whole body in his arms. I just want to kill him. Secretary Xiao, get out of the way. Xiao Tongyu looked at Yunze tremblingly, the anger on his face seemed to ignite the air around them. She knew that if she still stood in front of Yunze at this moment, she might be the one to be beaten in the next second. No, we can't let Yunze beat someone to death like this. Not to mention that Lin Xiao's crime was not serious enough, it would be even more unworthy if Yunze went to jail for beating someone to death. But will Yunze, who is so powerful in the imperial capital, really go to jail? There was no time to think about it anymore. Xiao Tongyu made up her mind, hugged Yunze's neck, stood on tiptoes, and kissed his lips. The sudden sweetness made Yunze lose his mind instantly. Xiao Tongyu's lips seemed to have a kind of magic that directly confused his thoughts. Yunze's originally furious eyes became filled with extreme possessiveness. He stretched out his hand and grabbed the back of Xiao Tongyu's head tightly, pressing her so that she could not resist, and kissed her forcefully and domineeringly, making her even hotter. After the long and lingering kiss, Yunze picked up Xiao Tongyu horizontally and walked towards the suite upstairs without looking back. Luo Juanji watched from the side with his mouth wide open, and uttered a silent, fuck. Han Yu patted him on the shoulder and said, stop watching. The fighting scene is over and the passionate scene is about to begin. Let's go. Then he squatted down, observed Lin Xiao lying motionless on the ground, and said to the person next to him, send this guy to the hospital. Chapter 26 I am Yunze's woman. Yunze has an exclusive suite upstairs in Siju, which Han Yu specially reserved for him. Whenever he got drunk and didn't want to go home, he would stay here. But Yunze has always been the only one in this suite. Today, for the first time in history, there is a woman here. Clang. Yunze pressed the fingerprint lock and kicked the door of the suite open. He roughly pulled Xiao Tongyu into the door and held her against it. Mr. G. Before Xiao Tongyu could finish her words, Yunze lowered his head and covered her mouth, and then he kissed her heavily. Xiao Tongyu's brain was deprived of oxygen by his kiss, tears welled up in her eyes, and her heart was about to jump out of her chest. She suddenly felt extremely regretful. Why did she provoke such a terrible Yunze for the sake of Lin Xiao, this unworthy scumbag? This time, she was afraid she would really die in bed. The arrow is on the string, ready to be fired. Yunze's body suddenly stiffened, as if he was hit by an electric current, and his eyes turned dark. He buried his head in Xiao Tongyu's neck, breathing lightly, and remained calm for a long time. What's going on? Could it be that Yunze is overindulging himself and is no longer able to cope? A few minutes later, Yunze got up from her and pulled the quilt to cover the woman. Just wait for me. Yunze threw down these words, turned around and walked out of the bedroom, slamming the door. Xiao Tongyu was left lying on the bed with a confused look on his face. What happened to Yunze? In the VIP box downstairs, Han Yu and Luo Juanji continued to drink red wine, when suddenly Han Yu's cell phone rang. He glanced at the caller and put it in front of Luo Juanji. Yunze? How long has it been? Is he so fast? Luo Juanji looked at his watch and couldn't hide his mockery. Han Yu pressed the hands-free button. Hello. Han Yu, why is there no condom in the room? Han Yu. Luo Juanji couldn't help but said, Yunze, you live in that room alone, why put a condom in it? To blow up a balloon for you to play with. Yunze's angry voice came from the other end of the phone, send me a condom. Han Yu held his forehead with his hand, when did you ever want to use a condom? Yunze, starting today. Okay, how many do you want? 2 boxes. Han Yu. There was a busy tone on the phone. Han Yu and Luo Juanji smiled at each other. It seemed that Yunze took those, ovarian dysfunction, and infertility, seriously. He fell in love with Xiao Tongyu. A few minutes later, Han Yu brought the condom, Xiao Tongyu's cell phone and car keys to Yunze's door. Yunze opened the door with his upper body naked and a sullen face. Before Han Yu could finish his sentence, the door was slammed shut. Han Yu. Yunze returned to the bedroom and found that the woman on the bed was already asleep. Half of her face was buried in the quilt, and her long hair was scattered on the pillow, setting off her fair skin, making her look beautiful. Yunze pushed her, Secretary Xiao, get up. Xiao Tongyu frowned slightly and licked his lips without any reaction. She was probably really tired, with tears in the corners of her eyes, probably because she was frightened just now. Yunze leaned over and gently wiped her tears. The love he felt for Xiao Tongyu seemed to exceed the most primitive animality in a man's body. Let her sleep and don't touch her tonight. Yunze sat on the bed and lit a cigarette. He frowned and found that he seemed to have jumped into a pit and was sinking deeper and deeper. At this time, Xiao Tongyu's cell phone rang on the bedside, and several messages popped up in succession. Tong, my brother asked you when we can have dinner together. I think he misses you, har har. Are you asleep? You're not with that bastard Yunze, are you? Remember to reply to me when you see the message tomorrow. Yunze's face darkened. He took Xiao Tongyu's finger and unlocked the phone. The contact person's name is Feifei. Yunze sent a message to the other party, who are you? Soon the other party replied, what? Who am I? Are you drunk? I am your best friend Zhuang Shufei. Zhuang Shufei? Yunze felt like he had heard this name somewhere before. Maybe the other party felt something was wrong, so he quickly sent another message, who are you? Are you Xiao Tongyu? Yunze replied, I am the dog man Yunze. There was silence from the other side, and no new information came. After thinking for a moment, Yunze called Han Yu again. What's wrong, Yunze? Not enough condoms. Who is Zhuang Shufei? Han Yu chuckled, are you bored so soon? Are you going to change women? Bullshit. She messaged my woman. Zhuang Shufei is a very popular actress recently, the princess of the Zhuang group. Where's her brother? The young master of the Zhuang family, Zhuang Shujie. Yunze's lips formed a line, what kind of person? I saw it once a few years ago. It was good. Yunze hung up the phone with a snap. Han Yu looked at his phone and found it funny. This East Asian jealous king was starting to get angry. The next morning, Xiao Tongyu was awakened by the dazzling sunlight. She looked down at herself, still naked, but not sore at all, and apart from a few bites at the entrance last night, there were no new kiss marks. Yunze didn't seem to touch her last night. I almost cried with joy. Did he finally get tired of her or did he find his conscience? She slept very soundly last night, as if she hadn't slept so soundly in a long time. Struggling to sit up from the bed, Xiao Tongyu saw Yunze leaning against the door frame of the bedroom, crossing his long legs, looking at her with a smile. He pointed to a brand new set of casual clothes at the end of the bed. Secretary Xiao, put that on, wash your face and brush your teeth, and come out for breakfast. Oh. Xiao Tongyu nodded obediently. Wait a minute. Yunze asked her to eat breakfast. He hit his head when he went out. After putting on clothes and washing up, Xiao Tongyu walked into the living room, where Yunze was sitting at the dining table, looking at his phone. The table was filled with delicious food, including Chinese and Western food, like a full banquet. Seeing Xiao Tongyu coming, he lazily patted the seat next to him and motioned for her to sit down. Boss Ji, let me stand here. I'll eat after you finish eating. Yunze said solemnly. Secretary Xiao is a maid in feudal society. Xiao Tongyu snorted. She felt that she might be even worse than a maid in feudal society here with Yunze. Sit down. Helplessly, Xiao Tongyu sat down. She picked up a piece of toast and spread the butter evenly on it. She spread the butter evenly on all sides, evenly, without missing a single corner. Then she handed the toast to Yunze. Looking at this piece of toast that looked perfect from every angle, Yunze's obsessive-compulsive disorder was cured. He took the toast, took a bite, and went back to looking at his phone. Xiao Tongyu suddenly found that his cell phone was missing. It seemed that he had left it in the VIP box yesterday. As if sensing her confusion, Yunze handed her cell phone. Secretary Xiao, someone wanted to see you last night. Who is it? Xiao Tongyu held the juice in one hand and curiously opened his mobile phone with the other hand, clicking on the top dialog box with Zhuang Shufei. The moment she saw the words, I am a dog man Yunze, the big mouthful of juice she had just put into her mouth was about to spray out. The next second, Yunze put his arms around her waist and covered her lips. He pried open her lips and teeth and swallowed the big mouthful of juice completely into his mouth. She felt a cool fragrance from his breath. Secretary Xiao, please pay attention. Xiao Tongyu covered her mouth in shock. Doesn't Yunze have misophobia? After last night, he had a chemical reaction and became abnormal. After the kiss, Yunze wiped the corner of her mouth with his thumb, took her phone and put it to her mouth. Tell this Zhuang Shufei that you are Yunze's woman. Send a voice message. Xiao Tongyu. Secretary Xiao, I won't say it for the third time. After saying that, Yunze pressed the voice button. Xiao Tongyu looked at Yunze's eyes, which were full of hostility and could not be disobeyed. She licked her lips and spoke to the phone. I am Yunze's woman. 3 seconds later, Zhuang Shufei sent a message. Yunze was very satisfied. He stood up and pinched Xiao Tongyu's little face full of collagen. I have a multinational video conference, so I'm leaving first. Secretary Xiao, remember to come to work on time tomorrow. Xiao Tongyu nodded dully, okay. Chapter 27. Her heart has long died. After Yunze left, Xiao Tongyu began to eat wholeheartedly. She was ready to eat the entire table full of breakfast. No matter what you think about Yunze, eating is still the happiest thing for you. Anyway, he gave her a 1-year deadline. After a year, when Xiao Tongyu has made it out of this unscathed, she will immediately resign and open her own design studio. At this time, Zhuang Shufei called. Tong, don't talk if you are kidnapped. Xiao Tongyu smiled. No, Yunze has left. The person on the other end of the phone let out a long sigh of relief. Fuck, this bastard is really crazy. Why can he look at your phone and force you to say that? Did you guys sleep together again last night? There really wasn't any last night. I don't know what Yunze was thinking. Xiao Tongyu stuffed a piece of beef bone into his mouth. Zhuang Shufei hesitated. Tong, you said. Yunze doesn't like you, right? Xiao Tongyu shook his head. Oh, how is that possible? What is there about me that he likes? How can he like me? I would rather believe that a sow can climb a tree. Zhuang Shufei still felt a little skeptical, but she did not continue to discuss the topic. By the way, Tong, are you free tomorrow night? My brother wants to have dinner with us. Of course, as long as I don't work overtime. I'm going to shoot that scene tomorrow until around 7 o'clock. Can we go together after I finish work? Xiao Tongyu chewed his eggs Benedict with gusto. Okay, if you don't have to work overtime, I'll come find you. What are you eating, Tong Tong? It smells so good. Yunze's breakfast, he didn't eat it, it can't be wasted. After breakfast, Xiao Tongyu hesitated for a few minutes and decided to go see Lin Xiao. Yunze didn't know how to control his strength yesterday. If she hadn't stopped him, Lin Xiao would have been beaten to death on the spot. He has repeatedly said that he has something to say, so let's talk it out with him all at once. Thinking of this, Xiao Tongyu stood up. Imperial Capital Hospital. Lin Xiao lay in bed for a whole night and a morning, and was finally able to sit up. He was seriously injured. His head was bandaged like a swollen bun, and his right hand was bandaged with faint traces of blood. His face was as pale as paper, his chest heaved, beads of sweat the size of beans kept rolling down his forehead, and with every breath, a sharp pain came. But the physical pain is far less than the heartache. Lin Qianhao and Yuan Qing sat beside the hospital bed, looking at their son anxiously. Lin Qianhao couldn't help but say, "Lin Xiao, you were just there to discuss business, how could you have provoked Yunze? How could Yunze be someone we can afford to offend?" Yuan Qing glanced at her husband in reproach. "Stop scolding our son when he's already like this." Lin Xiao remained silent. He didn't say that Yunze hit him because he saw him hugging Xiao Tongyu. Because of his secretary, Yunze actually did such a cruel thing. Lin Xiao was not a fool, he could see that Yunze had a special relationship with Xiao Tongyu. Could it be that the kiss mark on Xiao Tongyu's neck was left by Yunze? Thinking of this, Lin Xiao clenched his intact left hand into a fist, his nails digging deep into the flesh. If Xiao Tongyu and Yunze were together, Lin Xiao would never get her again. On the day Xiao Tongyu graduated from high school, Qin Mengyang was at Lin Xiao's house. She took off all her clothes to seduce him. Lin Xiao had drunk some wine and couldn't control himself. When they were making love, he caught a glimpse of Xiao Tongyu. That night, she sent a message to say goodbye, saying that she had moved away. Lin Xiao didn't know why he felt guilty. He felt that he couldn't face her, so he didn't respond and instinctively tried to avoid her. Maybe at that time, I had already developed different feelings for Xiao Tongyu. He didn't know. He just felt a pain in his chest. Suddenly, Yuan Qing's words pulled Lin Xiao back from his thoughts. "Lin Xiao, have you told Tong Tong that you are injured? Let her come to see you." Lin Xiao sneered in his heart. "Do I need to tell her? She has seen it all. If she wants to come, she will come naturally." "No need, Mom, she won't come." Just then, the door of the ward was pushed open and Xiao Tongyu stood at the door. The moment he saw her, Lin Xiao's eyes lit up. "Tong Tong." Yuan Qing rushed over and asked, "How did you know that Lin Xiao was in the hospital?" "Uncle Lin, Aunt Yuan, I heard about it by chance." Xiao Tongyu didn't intend to admit that she was at the scene, and she was sure that Lin Xiao would not tell them. The closest hospital to Saiju was the Imperial Capital Hospital. After she and Yunze left yesterday, Lin Xiao must have been sent here as soon as possible. "Oh, then you guys chat. Lin Xiao's mother and I will be leaving first." Lin Qianhao was somewhat delighted, thinking that Xiao Tongyu and Lin Xiao might have a chance together. He pulled Yuan Qing up and walked out of the ward, closing the door for them. Xiao Tongyu walked to the bed, but she didn't sit down. Seeing Lin Xiao being beaten like this, it would be a lie to say that she felt nothing in her heart. After all, Lin Xiao didn't commit such a serious crime. His indifference back then was also due to the fact that there was suddenly a person in his family for no apparent reason, a fool whom he didn't like and who kept chasing after him all day. "Lin Xiao, what do you want to talk to me about?" Lin Xiao raised his eyes and looked at Xiao Tongyu. His narrow peach blossom eyes were full of red bloodshot. "Tong Tong, are you and Yunze together?" Xiao Tongyu bit her lip. "You are wrong, I didn't." Of course Lin Xiao would not believe her words. "Tong Tong, even if you don't stay with me, you can't stay with Yunze. Do you know what kind of person he is? Will he really like you? He won't, and neither will you. Lin Xiao, stop pretending to be affectionate here. You're only moving yourself. You really don't believe that I like you. Lin Xiao, you treated me like trash when I needed you the most. It doesn't matter whether you really like me now or not, because I don't need your love." Lin Xiao's eyes gradually became misty. He knew he was wrong, very wrong. He was so wrong that he didn't realize his attachment to Xiao Tongyu, but instead pushed her further and further away. Lin Xiao lowered his eyes. "I understand, Tong Tong, I was wronged by you for everything that happened in the past. I will regard this beating as paying back my debt to you. At that time, Xiao Tongyu, who was living in the Lin family and had no one to rely on, had fantasized countless times that the boy she had secretly loved from the age of 8 to 18 would suddenly walk up to her one day and say that he had always liked her. However, this is more unattainable than a dream. In the end, what she has to face every day is the same person who said she is rustic and ugly, a strange orphan, and it would be better if she died. Thinking about it now, even Xiao Tongyu herself found it funny. Who gave her the courage to chase after such a cold and ruthless man for a full 10 years? Now, after really hearing the word love from his mouth, Xiao Tongyu felt no ripples in her heart. Because her heart had already died. I'm leaving, Lin Xiao, you should have a good rest. After Xiao Tongyu finished speaking, he walked out of the ward without looking back.